one thing about Saad is, I guess I was asleep at the wheel. I think Saad has been available for some time now. I got heightened attention because they scratched him on Saturday night. I think with Saad, even though he's got a full no trade, the word out there was don't assume he won't go places. Like check was what I heard. Because I think there are some places that he would go to that people may not consider.
That's Elliot Friedman on the 32 Thoughts podcast that, we talk hot stove season, T-Bone, with baseball and the winter warm-ups coming up soon. Man, this is hot stove hockey season with the roster freeze. I think it comes into play in about 5 days to where there's no transactions allowed and all the general managers are scrambling like it's the stock exchange. Be like, over here, buy, sell. And, of course, Elliot Friedman decided to stir the pot a little bit more with Brandon Saad's name. And Brandon Saad, I don't think it should surprise anybody. His name has come up in Elliot Friedman's 32 Thoughts podcast, the Athletic Trade Board earlier today. Brandon Saad's name is everywhere. With Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns, I'm Alex Ferrario, BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. Why is Brandon Saad's name in the conversation? Snarky Blues fans would say because he hasn't been playing well.
That's what I would say.
Well, I think the conversation heats up a little bit more on top of Friedman's comments because Brandon Saad is playing on the fourth line tonight. Now, Radek Faksa has been skating. He was skating today. He was an extra today. We're going to wait to find out what Jim Montgomery's comments are on if Brandon Saad is a player in this one, because if Faksa can play, I would imagine he goes into that fourth line, Brandon Saad comes out, and that would make 2 healthy scratches in 3 games. He played the other night against the Rangers after being scratched Saturday against the Dallas Stars, and you are seeing Brandon Saad's numbers decrease. Over the last 5 games, 1257, 1238, 318, 1044. Played a significant amount of time against the Rangers, 1526, but in tonight's game, expected to be playing on the fourth line. And T-Bone, for me, it's come down to now, is it a matter of when, not if, with Brandon Saad? And it's odd because yesterday, I kind of pushed back on the idea of trading Brandon Saad right now because it doesn't really make sense. I personally don't feel like it's worth bringing in another NHL player for Brandon Saad unless it's somebody that fits into your long-term plans. And I got to be honest, unless you're trading more draft picks, I don't know if you can get that player with just Brandon Saad unless you're getting another guy who needs a change of scenery, which is very possible. But the Blues are like, when you go trade away a Brandon Saad, I'm not just going to sit there and say like, cool, I'll take whatever production piece or reproduction piece that you need to go out there and find. I want something that helps my team now. And despite Brandon Saad's bad play, I'd rather have him on my third line than somebody in the minor leagues right now in the third line. So it's an odd situation to be in, but I can't deny the fact that he's gone from being a top 6 player to a third line player to a healthy scratch to playing, now potentially being on the fourth line and maybe a healthy scratch once again. It's just not it's not a welcoming feeling right now if you look at where Brandon Saad's trajectory has been with the Blues.
Yeah, I agree. It does feel more like a when, not if kind of situation with Brandon Saad. And I don't necessarily mind the idea of moving on from him because I think that's kind of just been the likeliest outcome for the St. Louis Blues. Now, they don't really have that internal piece right now, but Toropchenko's playing better than Brandon Saad has been. That's why he's skating in the top 9 and was on that second line at practice today with Shen and Kyrou. And it's hard for me to deny that. I think Walker has been playing and Joseph have been playing better on the wings on the fourth line. Like, when Faksa is healthy and ready to go, I think it makes all the sense in the world to scratch Saad. But I think that that's always been the likeliest outcome of, hey, we probably move Saad at some point, whether it be this year or next year, because you had Snuggerud. That was going to be coming up.
Right. And
you know that he's going to slot to that NHL roster. So I don't necessarily mind the idea of them shopping Brandon Saad. Now, I'm kind of skeptical of what you're going to get for him right now because he's got a year and a half left on his contract, and he's not playing particularly well this year. Now, maybe it is what you said there of, hey, maybe it's just maybe you need to swap a guy for change of scenery purposes with Brandon Saad. But if I'm the St. Louis Blues, look, Army had mentioned it after they traded for Cam Fowler over the weekend of, he was asked about giving up a second-round pick in that deal, and he said, well, we think we can recoup some of those assets back. I think he was talking about Brandon Saad's name.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where I think it's, okay, what are the Blues looking for in a trade for Brandon Saad? I don't know if it's a guy that would be NHL player that they would just go swap for swap. Okay, they need change of sceneries. I wonder if Army's looking at it saying, okay, let's recollect some assets now. Even though we're not in that asset collecting phase of the retool anymore, we are more in that buying stage. But still nice to have some assets. And I wonder if that's what he's looking for right now. Can we get a second round pick back for Brandon Saad and move on from him, free up a spot in our top 9 because we've got guys that are playing better than him right now.
And that's where I'm at with this. Like, I know a lot of people on our Air Comfort Service text line 314-399-9646, also on our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. Everybody is bringing up Trent Frederick's name. We'll trade Brandon Saad for Trent Frederick. Guys, this isn't fantasy hockey GM where you could just call a team and say, hey, we want to give you our bad player for your bad player. And I shouldn't say bad player for Brandon Saad, underperforming player. That you don't strike those deals unless the other team values that player. So I look at this as, if I'm going to get rid of Brandon Saad, because on one hand, like, Brandon Saad still is a valuable piece to a team. It's just a matter of you got to get the best out of him. And right now you have not been getting the best out of him. There's nothing wrong with seeing guys healthy scratch. Joe brought this up on pregame Sunday night. Like, when Craig Berube took over, he healthy scratched David Perron. And David Perron stepped in and then never saw a healthy scratch again. So it's a matter of the player taking what the coach is trying to offer to him. And maybe, once again, you're putting him on the fourth line to try and get more. But I'm not just going to trade the player. And I understand a lot of people want to get rid of the money. But just trading away the player and not bringing back anything in return doesn't help this team right now. And as I continue to move along, Brandon Saad is a placeholder for me. Brandon Saad is a placeholder for a Dalibor Dvorsky, for a Jimmy Snuggerud. And until those guys are ready, I'd much rather have a guy who has played over 500 games in the NHL than going to get another reclamation project. And for a team that has traded away multiple second-round draft picks, multiple third-round draft picks, I think if I'm the Blues, I'd like to hold on to that piece and maybe recoup some of those assets once I get closer to the deadline if he is a valuable commodity on the trade market.
As we're sitting here talking about this, I'm kind of thinking, why has it gone so south for Brandon Saad so far this year? Because we've seen Saad go through these kind of seasons before, right? Where we talk about, oh, is it another one of those goal droughts? Then you look up and it's like 10 goals, no assists. And it's like, Saad, pass the puck, please.
Well, an assist every once in a while.
I wonder, and this is my question to you, do you think this is hey, Saad is just kind of hit the end of the road with the St. Louis Blues, or this is more of hey, it's the third line center spot that we're looking at, and that's why you're not seeing Saad get maximized here? Because as I was looking at these line combinations and thinking about this, whereas he spent most of his time, now he's kind of bounced around, but he has played a lot with Oscar Sundqvist as his third line center this season. So it makes me wonder if that is where that clear underlying problem is of, hey, we've talked about it all year long. This team is clearly missing a top 9 center, whether you want to say they need a second or third line center. They're clearly missing somebody in that spot, and I wonder if that's what we're seeing with Brandon Saad. I'm still open to trading him, and I think the Blues are clearly shopping him.
Yeah. But
I wonder if this is more of a problem of that third line center spot more so than it is, hey, Brandon Saad has just lost his ability, not his ability, but his going through such a rut here in St. Louis.
Yeah, let's set aside the Drew Bannister time because Montgomery's a different coach, and I know people are going to go back and look, well, he played 13 games at the beginning of the season with Robert Thomas. Let's set that aside. Just going back from the New York Rangers game on, played on the wing with Shannon Kyrou, moved up with Thomas and Neighbors. That was when the Pavel Buchnevich injury happened. Moved back down to play with Sundqvist and Bolduc. Back with Shannon Kyrou, Shannon Neighbors. We've seen Shannon Kyrou. This was the healthy scratch for Dallas. So pretty much all the way up until the Dallas Stars game, with the exception of a couple of games, he was playing with Braden Shen and Jordan Kyrou. And I personally, and I know a lot of people have their own feelings about Braden Shen, I think Braden Shen has been very good for this team as the second-line center. He's had some rough games at the faceoff dot, but he's been better than advertised from last season. So I personally think this is just a matter of Brandon Saad not finding his game. And I don't know if it's his game has tailed off or if it's just overall the 5-on-5 play. I mean, Brandon Saad has always been a streaky player. He's always been a guy that for 8 games he goes silent, and then for the next 5 he scores 6 goals. The question, though, is for what has he played now? 30. He's played 28 games, and with the exception of 2 of them where he scored 4 goals, he has not picked up a goal for this team, and he's only picked up a few assists this season.
Yeah, and now as I'm looking at it, he has spent a lot of time with Thomas or Shen.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. It was just something that I found a little interesting of, okay, is this one of those, we've talked about this before, right? What do you do with someone like a Robert Thomas? Who do you put on his wing is the question of, okay, it helps you evaluate that player, right? You get to evaluate Jake Neighbors better because you have a Robert Thomas at center with him. So I just kind of wanted to bring that up into the kind of fold here. But yeah, I think you're spot on. Look, he's had his opportunities with Thomas. He's had his opportunities with Shen, excuse me. I think it is kind of one of those where, okay, looking at Saad right now, it's not working for some reason here in St. Louis. Can you get something in return? And I that's where we both agree. I think it's now time to shop for more of a second-round pick, see if you can find something there. And then you have an asset that you can either, A, use at the draft, or B, use if you want to do something else at this year's trade deadline.
I think the other issue with Brandon Saad right now, and why I would imagine Jim Montgomery's not, getting him into those top 6 roles. One, he talked about how he needs to be in the areas where goals are scored, and he just has not been doing that right now, obviously, because he hasn't scored since November 14th against the Buffalo Sabres. But if you just look at this last stretch of games, since the month of December, he's been a minus in 4 of those 7. Now, I understand plus minus is fickle number for a lot of people, but for how some people judge Jordan Kyrou, I'd say plus minus is the tell-all be-all with guys play. And defensively, he has not been sound for this team. So if you're not benefiting defensively, if you're not contributing and offensively, where do you fit in on this? And I think that's why you've seen him as a healthy scratch for the Blues. On the other side of things, with their line combinations, and again, they had their skate earlier today. Saad was skating on that 4th line. The power play units have not changed. And I know people might say, well, why would they change the power play units? You scored in 3 consecutive games since Montgomery's taken over. You're right. And we talked yesterday, Bradford, about how well this power play has been playing, T-Bone. But I look at this power play as you're generating opportunities, which is good. You're generating momentum, but at some point you got to turn that momentum into goals. And I'm really wondering if they're getting to the point where they look at this and say, let's change things up a little bit. Now, I don't know how much you could change it up because I don't think anybody that you have provides the one-time shot. But at some point, I look at Neighbors, Kyrou, Booch, Thomas, and Falk and say, do we put like a Holloway up there? Or do we put a Bolduc up there? I know you don't want to stunt the chemistry of that number 1 power play unit, but at some point, don't you want to get a different look with a guy who does have a shot from one of those flank positions so that you can put a little aggressiveness on the goaltender?
Yeah, I agree with what you said there at the beginning of, I just don't know if they've got the personnel. So making some of these changes, I don't know how much it helps. The other thing is, as you said, they've been building some momentum. I'm still on the side of, okay, let's keep it together another game or two, see if that leads to something here with these power play units. But the other thing, too, is because I agree, I wouldn't mind the idea of moving up Holloway or Bolduc, especially Bolduc. I think Bolduc's slapper's gone a little under the radar so far this year.
Especially, yeah.
I just don't know who you take off of that top unit, because I don't think I want to take Kyrou off because I've liked Kyrou's game so far this year. I don't know if I want to take Booch off of that spot because we've seen Booch has got the shot.
It's one of those two, though.
Yeah, I know, and that's where it's tough.
Neighbors is your net front presence. Yeah. You're not going to take him off of it.
You're not going to move Thomas because he helps move that puck very well.
You got 3 areas that you can move it, and I'm with you on the Kyrou. I'm not going to move Kyrou off of that because he actually has been contributing to the power play. It comes down to either Booch or do you put a different defenseman on there? Do you put a Broberg out in the number 1 unit rather than a Justin Falk who hasn't been putting up the power play points either? It's weird, though, because if you look around the NHL, and we're going to talk about the 5-on-5 play coming up in a little bit in the 12 o'clock hour, but their power play since Montgomery's taken over has put up the same amount of goals as teams like the Minnesota Wild, the Vegas Golden Knights. It's not like they're the worst team in the National Hockey League at power play. In fact, they're actually pretty similar to where they were with Drew Bannister, floating around 24th, 25th. It's just that's the opportunity to really gain momentum or put a game away. Like the Rangers, perfect example. You were up 3-0 and you got a power play early in the 3rd period. You kill that team's hopes with a power play goal early on, but does changing a personnel really make the difference? That's, I guess, the question they're asking.
Yeah, and I don't mind the idea of putting Broberg back up at that top unit because you're right, Falk hasn't done a whole lot for that top unit. So if you wanted to make that swap, I'm okay with that. But you're right. I mean, when you're not excellent at 5-on-5, which it's hard to be that. And look, they've played better, like you said. We'll talk about it later on in the show. They have played better under Montgomery. It's a small sample size. But when you don't have that power play that's clicking, it's harder to come back in games. And to your point, it's harder to put games away. And that's why because they're building some momentum here of late, I'm okay with sticking with these units.
Yeah.
But I think if you see like a rough night tonight, then you're going to be back to the drawing board of, okay, what changes can we make?
Yeah, well, and I give Jim Montgomery credit for not changing it up, because that's something that we complained a lot about with Drew Bannister. Like, things were changing all the time. It's how you build consistency. And look, you can't deny the fact that this team is 4 games above 500 since Jim Montgomery has taken over. Again, if you missed it, line combinations earlier today, Radek Faksa is skating, but he was skating as an extra. We'll find out what Jim Montgomery has to say about the line combos if Faksa does get in. But Brandon Saad was skating on the 4th line per Jeremy Rutherford of The Athletic. Jordan Binnington expected to get the start, and JR is going to join us at 1:15 today. Our Blues insider for The Athletic. Tanner Hendrickson, Bradford Bruns, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up at 15, we'll get to some NFL quick hitters. But coming up next, Eli Drinkowitz's task of reloading this offense is getting a little more tougher. What is this going to look like going closer and closer to the start of the new Mizzou football season? We'll discuss next, and the transfer portal here on 101 ESPN.
St. Louis Blues hockey can be heard exclusively on 101 ESPN. Get the info you need before and after every Blues game with the First Community pre- and post-game show.
First Community Credit Union, calling St. Louis home for 90 years and powered by Scott Lee Heating Company.
Make your picks for this week's Fastlane Pick'em Challenge at 101ESPN.com. Show off your football knowledge and see if you can top the Fastlane and the dudes from the Rizzuto Show on the point. For this week's top score, it's the Fastlane and the Riz Show throwing down all football season long in the Pick'em Challenge. Enter your picks for this week right now at 101ESPN.com.
Refreshed by Bud Light, official beer sponsor of the NFL. Easy to Sunday, easy to enjoy.
This is exactly where you want to be, listening to us. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield Studio on 101 ESPN.
So, Eli Drinkwitz coming off of a season where, once again, they're ranked top 25 at the end of the year, do miss the college football playoffs. But there was a lot of optimism at the end of the season. With Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns, I'm Alex Ferrario. I don't know how to measure this one. I don't feel like the optimism is dwindling, and I said this yesterday. I'm going to let the dust settle on the transfer portal, recruiting, and new players for Drink before I can sit there and actually say, hey, things have fallen off bad, and you're going to have to fix this. But things got a little more tougher with how they're reloading this offense over these last couple of days. We mentioned it, but I feel like you touch on it a little bit more. Lacey, the running back, Quan Lacey, the running back that entered his name into the transfer portal yesterday, he's going to Ole Miss now. This was a guy that it felt like Mizzou was really focusing in on, of like, this is our next big thing. He was a 4-star recruit, if I'm not mistaken, that they got, running back that you're taking over for 2 guys that you brought in last season. He didn't get a whole lot of reps. What was it, 23 carries and 104 yards last season, but this was a guy that they were kind of investing in. But now you lose the running back. BK's talked about how you still have to do some work on the offensive line. And oh, by the way, the biggest piece that you really need is a quarterback. Things are getting a little more difficult for Eli Drinkowitz in terms of reloading this offense going into next season, because I think we all can agree Mizzou is still one of the better teams in the SEC, even with these guys that have entered the transfer portal. But, man, to keep your name up towards the top of that list, you're going to have to get some work done before the start of the season when you've missed out on Miller Moss, when a lot of these running backs have already committed to other schools. I don't know how many more names are going to be out there that get you excited.
Yeah, things got a lot tougher for Drink now that he's lost another running back, 2 from graduation now, 1 to the portal. Because think about the Missouri Tigers. Now, look, I'm not going to downgrade. They've got to find a quarterback in the transfer portal, right? It's the most important position in all of sports is quarterback. So you've got to find somebody to take over for Brady Cook, who wasn't a game changer, but he was a great game manager, right?
Right.
And that's why do I think this running back loss is so important for the Missouri Tigers, as someone that they kind of had circled as, okay, he's probably going to get some of the carries, and we'll see what they do. They got 2 more guys on the roster still, but my expectation is they'll hit the portal looking for probably 2 guys would be my guess, is because think about when Missouri's been at its best, right? What's been the thing that's been really clicking for the Drinkwitz / Kirby Moore offense? It's been the running game. It hasn't been the quarterback play. Now, that can change if you get the right guy in the portal. But it's always been, hey, everything sets up best for Missouri. The deep down ball threat, deep throws down the field that have worked out for them is set up because of the running game. Why were they so good 2 years ago? Sure, they had Luther Burden, who had a really good year. Yeah, Brady Cook had a great year. Cody Schrader was the piece of the offense.
It's a great point.
That was the thing that drove Mizzou down the field and would always be the guy that they could turn to, hey, put the game away. Mm-hmm. And they didn't really have that guy this year. Their running back room wasn't bad, but it wasn't as good as it was last year or 2 years ago with Cody Schrader. So I'm interested to see what Drinkwitz's pivot is here in this running back room, because he's now got to fill 2 key spots for his offense. And I mean, you mentioned the offensive line. You can add that into number 3. I think he's doing a really good job retooling the defense. Brought in a couple of interesting linebackers yesterday, but he's going to really have to retool this offense here on the fly, because if we're going to talk about, BK's brought this up, and I kind of agree with him, where the Fast Lane has said, hey, this was the year for Missouri. If you don't want this to just be it was a 1-year window for the Tigers, he's really going to have to hit the portal hard, find the answer at quarterback, find some answers at running back, while also adding some depth to the O-line.
And if you're able to grab some of those reinforcements, specifically, Tanner, on the offensive side of the football, it really does put you in a nice position of potentially revisiting the same amount of success that you had this season. We talked about it briefly yesterday. The schedule sets up so favorably again for this program next season. You have 8 home games, and you're playing a lot of the would-be also-rans in the conference. But let's head to the ground first and foremost. Now, in a lot of ways, I feel as if Missouri at this point in time, as we get closer to late December, it's really eerily similar to what the situation looked like last year, because before you were able to poach Noel and Carroll from that transfer portal, you were planning on going into this season with Jamal Roberts as your lead guy, and then a host of others being able to complement him. Roberts is returning, but you're right. The depth has definitely taken that hit, and magically, 8 hours after certainly you had Lacey declaring his intent to enter the portal, he winds up with Ole Miss after all. And I think that hand in hand, why would that be? Hand in hand, it goes along with the offensive line. It's a great thing that you're getting Tollison back as a senior. He's going to be returning from injury to basically captain that offensive line. But in losing somebody who has NFL caliber talent in Mimbu on the right side, on those draw plays, on those spread plays, how many different occasions did Mimbu really be that road grader? Was he that road grader up front? You have a lot of different questions there, and specifically at Signal Caller too. I'm sorry, but despite all of the talk that you heard last season, the battle, whether you wanted to categorize it as a battle or not, between Sam Horn and Brady Cook before Cook had his great fortune, you're talking about somebody as a sophomore who's coming off of Tommy John surgery, and maybe he has the tools, maybe he has the physical tools, but there's absolutely no way that you run it back to any extent with Drew Pine. And Zoller's your prize quarterback recruit next year as a freshman. He's rehabbing from surgery, so you have to get something done in the portal sooner rather than later. But now those options, those name options, are dwindling.
Well, in this portal, I mean, this portal is creating some really difficult situations. And T-Bone, you brought this up to us in the office a little bit ago. Man, you look at what's taking place with Georgia trying to figure out the replacement for Carson Beck if he's not playing in this college football playoffs, which I don't think anybody's expecting him to be playing this weekend.
Gunner, baby.
But then on top of that, like, if I'm not mistaken, because I'm not 100% in tune with how the transfer portal thing works, these kids have to be in the transfer portal before these college football playoff things or before they take place, if you want an opportunity to go elsewhere and play. So you have this opportunity, like Penn State's backup quarterback. I brought him up to you yesterday, Bradford, about Mizzou.
Oh, yeah.
I stick with my team and potentially get to be a part of a college football playoff run, or I go to the transfer portal and try and go find a job for me to work this upcoming season.
Yeah, it is a wild, wild west scenario, and these college football playoff coaches, I'm fascinated to see how they deal with this. I mean, you brought up the Penn State one. If you're Penn State now, well, that from the side of the players puts them in a tough spot, right?
Totally.
Because you don't really want to look like the guy that's like, man, I could go win the college football playoff with my squad as the backup quarterback. But you know what? I got to go find my job. And he's not wrong in doing that, right? He can go get himself probably $1 million NIL package somewhere to go be a potential starter at another school. So he needs to enter his name into the transfer portal. So I don't blame him for going about that. But it brings up two interesting questions for these teams that are losing backups on their roster, especially for Penn State. What happens if your starter, Drew Aller, goes down in these playoffs?
Seriously.
We're now to our third-string quarterback. Like, I guess we recruit him, so we kind of like him. But
Yeah, but we didn't like you for 3 years from now.
And we liked another guy ahead of you. So now you're in a really interesting spot if that happens. And look, I hope that doesn't happen. But, I mean, you're talking about that happening across all kinds of not just at the quarterback spot. As of yesterday, according to ESPN, there are 68 scholarship players on college football teams that have entered the portal.
My goodness.
Which is crazy. And again, I don't blame those kids for doing it, right? If they want a chance to go play somewhere, they've got to get their name into the portal before the new year gets going. And then you've got, of course, Georgia, who is, okay, well, if we don't have Carson Beck, it gives us a great opportunity to evaluate what we have in Gunnar Stockton. But we also know that there's a chance Gunnar Stockton's not the answer, so we may need to go to the transfer portal, bring somebody in. But if, say, Stockton doesn't play, and then Stockton sees, well, they just brought in my replacement next year, okay, well, now I'm jumping to the transfer portal. Mm-hmm. It is crazy what these playoff coaches are having to deal with in this transfer portal era.
Unbelievable number that you cited, 68 as of yesterday belonging to college football playoff participants. And now you're not just talking, guys, about a 4-pack either as far as the final constitution of teams left at the end of the season. No, with the expanded version, we have 12. So that means there's been so much talk in recent weeks. Okay, James Franklin, for instance, is he able to win the big game? Is he able to win a number of them for Penn State to get over that hurdle? Well, now potentially to win the national championship, to secure that hardware, you have to win 4, and you have to navigate this convoluted road of having to deal with diminished rosters as a result of this Wild West landscape with which you're dealing. I don't begrudge the players whatsoever, and most coaches in their right minds, they understand it as well. This is the game. This is the way that you have to adapt in the year 2024. Eli Drinkwitz gets that. It's just that right now, as we said yesterday, Alex, the Mizzou fan base, I really feel as if over the last year, the success that you've had on the field and then being able to dole out all of those handsome NIL payouts, really, it's a matter of feeling a little too entitled, and this is a jarring jolt back to reality.
Boy, I love personally Western films, so I like the Wild Wild West. Let's hope Eli Drinkwitz can come out on top in that shootout, because you don't want to be the other guy at the OK Corral.
Can we bust out the hats again?
How many Western references?
Relax,
Whoa, you calm down over there, Bradford.
I don't know where they are, but relax.
Yeah, no, we only have one of them in here.
I think Bradford took one home.
I think Bradford took 2 of them home.
I'll see myself out.
For personal reasons. Tanner Hendrickson, Bradford Bruns, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up at 15, we've got questions and answers. You send us questions to the Air Comfort Service text line, 314-399-9646. Over on the Graveyard as well, our YouTube chat, 101 ESPN STL. We'll answer them. But coming up next, some NFL quick hitters, including who is going to be the number 1 seed in the NFC, because I could have told you a for sure answer last week. Now I'm not so sure. We'll get to all that next here on 101 ESPN.
Hey, Blues fans, enter the Verizon Discover NHL Winter Classic Sweepstakes for your chance to see the St. Louis Blues take on the Chicago Blackhawks New Year's Eve in the Discover NHL Winter Classic at Wrigley Field in Chicago. One winner will receive 4 tickets to the game plus a $3,000 gift card. Hurry to select St. Louis area Verizon locations or go to 101ESPN.com and enter by December 18th. No purchase necessary to enter. Must be legal U.S. resident of Missouri or Illinois, age 18 years or older to enter. Void where prohibited. For official rules and full details, Visit 101ESPN.com. Start your day with the morning after on 101 ESPN. Get in the know first on everything St. Louis sports with Tim McKernan, Doug Vaughn, and Martin Kilcoy. Listen to TMA weekday mornings from 7 to 11 a.m. on 101 ESPN. The morning after is presented by Brown and Crouppen Law Firm. 101 ESPN Sports Center.
Blues dance with the Devils. Good morning. I'm Bradford Bruns with your Sports Center update, driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Tonight on 101 ESPN, St. Louis eyes its second straight win at Enterprise Center. Second place New Jersey arrives downtown for a 7 o'clock puck drop. Jim Montgomery's crew edged those scuffling Rangers Sunday 3-2. Elsewhere, Central leading Winnipeg visits San Jose, while red-hot Washington meets Chicago. Windy City football. Bears fall to Minnesota 30-12. Atlanta staves off Las Vegas 15-9. Portal activity. College game finds Mizzou landing West Virginia linebacker Josiah Trotter. The Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
They are St. Louis. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
Along with Tanner Hendrickson, Bradford Bruns, I'm Alex Ferrario. We'll get to questions and answers on the other side. You send us your questions, 314-399-9646, Air Comfort Service text line. We'll get to those answers in 15. But now some NFL quick hitters as we wrap up officially Week 15. The Vikings go out there and just dismantle the Bears last night. So now you've got three teams in the NFC, guys, all with 12 victories. the Vikings, the Eagles, the Lions. If you would have asked me who's going to be the number 1 seed in the NFC last week, I would have said Lions before you finished the sentence and then not taken any questions. Now I'm not so certain. Actually, now I think I am certain that the Eagles are going to win that one.
Oh, okay.
Like, if you look at the final 3 games for those 3 teams, Eagles take on the Commanders, Cowboys, Giants. I think, no disrespect to the Commanders, but I think as long as the Eagles can take care of that business, they'll be fine. The Lions, I think, will be fine against the Bears and the Niners, and then it comes down to who wins versus the Vikings. Lions versus the Vikings. And that's why I think the easiest path for 15 wins might actually be Philadelphia, which is a huge wrinkle in this conversation that I did not expect about 5 weeks ago.
Funny thing is I think I agree with you because the Lions are just continuing to lose bodies. And now that they've lost Montgomery, look, they've got Gibbs, so they are going to be fine. But that is another element of their game that they lose now. Now they lose that more physical running back in the backfield compared to Jahmyr Gibbs, who's more of the skill guy, if you will, is what I would call him.
Slasher.
Yeah, I think that injury is a very impactful one on top of they keep losing guys defensively to where I agree with Alex. I think the Eagles are now in the driver's seat. Now, they need that loss to happen for Detroit somewhere because Detroit will hold the tiebreaker over them. But, I mean, you look at that schedule. At Chicago, they should win that one. San Francisco, look, I think we're at the end of this era of 49ers football. I still won't write them off to potentially take them down. Yeah. And then the way Minnesota's playing, man, right now I think they could beat Detroit. And if they do that, Philadelphia's in the driver's seat because they've got the easiest schedule of these 3 teams.
Well, that Week 18 matchup could be for everything in all likelihood, with Minnesota, of course, and Detroit getting flexed in all likelihood. But it's quite funny because we have a team in Philadelphia that has won 10 consecutive games, up to 12 victories overall on the season, and yet most of the attention is really paid to what is transpiring in the locker room and the melodrama around all of this different organizational matters, all that stuff. Nick Sirianni, decision-making aside, all of that. This is a team that you could argue has the best roster makeup, I would say, out of any of the defenders as far as the balance is concerned. Jalen Hurts, he displayed it on Sunday going down the field. A.J. Brown, great. He appears to be happy in the moment. But Saquon Barkley, early in the season, we were talking about him legitimately being an MVP candidate as well. Going into the playoffs, I don't necessarily know if I would take the Eagles mano-a-mano against any of these other premier outfits. But if you're asking me who's going to really lock up that number 1 seed, I don't see how you can go against Philadelphia at this point.
Man, it's wild because I actually feel different with Bradford. I think mano-a-mano, I would give it to the Eagles now. And it's only because of all of these injuries. Like, I believe the Lions could still go head-to-head with the Eagles on offense, and you could outscore them. But I think Philadelphia can get a stop, and right now I don't think Detroit can get a stop in a playoff game, and that's my concern. Could they put up 45? Absolutely, but I expect the other side to have some type of adjustment against the Lions' offense. And you're losing your best asset in terms of 2 different options at the running back position that other teams have to game plan against. Now I can't say the same thing because you don't have that other weapon and you don't have the ability to get a stop defensively.
Yeah, I have no problem whatsoever about proclaiming Philadelphia as the number 1 seed. But if you get into the postseason, and let's just say that the matchup becomes a Green Bay, for example, a Green Bay team that has been very hot as well, and another team that is extremely balanced when it comes to going down the field with Jordan Love, or can really match you from a ground game standpoint as well, and Josh Jacobs. If you're asking me when it comes down to scheming game plans too, maybe it does come down to the head coaches. LaFleur versus Sirianni? I'm sorry, I'm leaning toward the former there.
So let's stick in the NFC because it's pretty obvious the 3 teams that are locked in, the Lions, the Eagles, the Vikings, and then we've got 4 other spots to talk about. And I don't know about you guys, but it sure seems like 3 of those 4, and maybe I could say all 4 of them, have seemingly been locked up with the Packers, the Commanders. I would put the Buccaneers there because I don't think anybody else is going to take them down in the NFC South, although the Vikings did get a good victory. I don't know if you can call that a good victory. Do you feel the same way that Bucks, Rams, Packers, Commanders have locked up the rest of the NFC, or is there another team that could sneak in at the end?
So I think those wild card spots, Vikings, Packers, Commanders, I think those are locked in. I know Seattle's technically a game out. I think the Seahawks' path to the playoffs is the NFC West, because I think Commanders are going to be fine ultimately and get in. I think it comes down to Rams-Seahawks. I still believe Bucs are a much better football team than the Falcons. I think they can hold them off, even though the Falcons somehow beat them twice in the regular season and hold the tiebreaker.
That was when the Falcons were good.
Yeah, the Falcons are not playing great football, and that was, you mentioned an ugly win last night. So though it's maybe not a lock, I am leaning towards a lock for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The only one that's up for grabs to me is between the Rams and the Seahawks, and maybe it's the homerness in me, the fandom in me.
Probably.
I think the Rams are the best team in the NFC West. I think they're going to end up winning that division.
No, I will second that, Tanner, because even before the Geno Smith injury on Sunday night, leaving that contest versus the Packers, a bad loss at that with the knee injury, I had all kinds of qualms about Seattle's ability to compete in the last few weeks of the season versus the Rams. Los Angeles has been ascending for weeks, whereas it always seems as if you're waiting for that other shoe to drop in the red zone with Seattle. Smith has been a turnover machine that often simply can't get it done inside of the 20. And even though Washington, in my opinion, has been living on the edge for a few weeks, I do like the Commanders as being locked in, quite frankly. And Tampa Bay versus Atlanta, that dynamic or comparison as well. Who would have said a couple of years ago, no, I have much more trust in Baker Mayfield than Kirk Cousins quarterbacking my team. There's a difference in that division.
Final one, let's do this. Saw people, of course, because now you're getting closer and closer to draft season. You're talking about the odds of selecting first overall. How much do you guys care about the NFL draft this year, like in terms of the number one overall pick? Because
very little.
The past few years, hasn't it felt like all focus? It's been Caleb Williams, that's been the biggest talk. And then the year prior to that, it was the CJ Stroud, Bryce Young conversation. Does that tell you more about the quarterbacks, or does that tell you more about the disaster that is the teams that could be drafting in the top 2, top 3?
I think it's about the quarterbacks in this year's class, because though when Caleb Williams is available, it was kind of the story of, okay, who's the one that's like tanking to get to the bottom, right? Who's the team that's going to end up with that number one overall pick? You mentioned that CJ Stroud draft. Remember the Texans blew it on the last day? Lovie Smith and his going out party went for, I think it was a 2-point play, if I remember correctly. Got the 2-point conversion. They ended up with a better quarterback. So Lovie, it didn't end up hurting Lovie that much. But I could care less about who ends up with the number one overall pick, because there's just not a great quarterback selection class. I don't really care where Shedeur ends up. I wanted to see Caleb Williams go to a team like the Bears, because the Bears had, like we talked about it in the offseason, right? Feels like the perfect spot for a rookie quarterback. They've got the wide receivers that are there. The defense was pretty good. Eberflus, we thought was an okay coach. We were wrong, but we thought that. I got excited about that draft.
Yeah.
I was excited about Bryce Young or whoever it was going to go number one overall, because there were so many of them. It was like, okay, well, if Carolina gets this guy, and then Texans get this guy. This year's like, I could care less where Shedeur goes.
It's wild that the most excitable team, if that's a word, to me, is the New England Patriots. And they're projected to be the 3rd overall pick
right now.
I don't care about Vegas, because I think Vegas is probably going to be taking Shedeur Sanders, and great, you still have a lot of issues. The Giants are a complete disaster, and frankly, the next best quarterback's not fixing your problems. New England's the most intriguing to me, because that legitimately could be a Travis Hunter destination, and I've seen Drake May. Now you go get a weapon, and it's like, okay, now it's looking a little interesting.
I'm with you there. I am more intrigued by the destination where Travis Hunter ultimately winds up, because I don't know about you guys personally, but I feel as if a lot of people out there in the audience too may have that Sanders fatigue insofar as, okay, you've heard about the narratives obviously all season long. You know about the marquee factor there, the hype in the building. He was in New York a few days ago, apparently slinging passes to Malik Neighbors. So whether it ends up being New York or Las Vegas, one thing is for certain. He's going to get the big market. He's going to get that optimal market, which means Dion will be happy as well.
Yeah. One thing that would be interesting if the Raiders end up with the number one pick is the fact that you would have Tom Brady part of that ownership group. I don't know how much he would end up helping Sanders or not, because all the weird rules around that, but it becomes an interesting storyline. I don't know what I want more. That storyline, or say Jacksonville somehow ends up with the number one pick, and you get Dion going out. Shedeur's not going to Jacksonville. No way is he going to Jacksonville.
I just do not want Jacksonville with a number one overall pick because of that reason. God, I don't want the soap opera for the next month and a half of he's not taking, he's going where he gets to be the quarterback. Okay.
If you have that number one pick, if you're Las Vegas, are you really content to ride with Pierce going into the different look moving forward?
No.
The Daboll conversation is another matter, but can you really stand plan to stick with him?
No, if I'm drafting a quarterback, I'm firing that and I'm bringing somebody else in.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of who you're bringing in, and that's going to be another one of the good drama questions that we'll be asking in the offseason. Tanner Hendrickson, Bradford Bruns, Alex Ferrario coming up next. You send us your questions, 314-399-9646, Air Comfort Service text line. Also on our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL, The Graveyard. That's our chat over on YouTube. Send us your questions. We'll answer them next year on 101 ESPN.
This Saturday, it's an NFL doubleheader. Game 1, Chiefs and Texans. Game 2, Ravens and Steelers. Coverage starts Saturday morning at 11. Your destination for the NFL in St. Louis is 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my insurance agent, Tracy Bibb, taking care of you and your family. Was having a conversation with my sister last night. I was over there at her house, letting our girls play together, and we were just talking about the flooding damage that she had in the past spring and talking about looking forward to the next spring. And she was like, I just don't want to keep dealing with this. And I told her, it's like, well, you need to get a better insurance agent like Tracy Bibb. So when you have those issues, when the flooding happens in your basement, when that tree branch falls on your roof and takes out part of your house, you've got somebody who is there to help you immediately. And that's the customer service you get with Tracy Bibb. Always available for you, always preaching. It's not a matter of if something happens, it's when something happens. And when it does, Tracy is there to take care of you. Give her a call today, 314-328-4260. Just mention my name, Alex Ferrario, and she'll get you switched over. She'll walk you through the free non-committal quote. Super simple. She'll even cancel your insurance agent for you. 314-328-4260. It's no fib. You're always in great hands with the Bibb. Jeff Bender from Wentzville, Missouri. He was named our new 101 ESPN Blues Fan of the Week.
Submit your pick now to be the next 101 ESPN Blues Fan of the Week and take home a pair of tickets to an upcoming Blues game. Learn more at 101ESPN.com. Giving you the picture, the real big St. Louis sports picture. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN. You've got questions, we may have the answers. Maybe. It's BK and Ferrario's questions and answers on 101 ESPN.
314-399-9646 Air Comfort Service text line, YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. Studio cams brought to you by Air Alliance Team. T-Bone, did you just have a little scoop for us?
Yeah, I'll call it a scoop. So at On3 Sports, who's on X, formerly known as Twitter, so we're sophisticated here.
I call it Twitter still.
They are saying keep an eye on, according to Pete Nakos, I believe is his name. Keep an eye on that Penn State quarterback that we were talking about, the backup that's now transferring during the college football playoff. Pribula, is that how you say his name?
Pribula, close enough.
Thank you.
We'll take his game.
Bo.
He is supposedly 3 schools to keep an eye on it in his transfer portal race, or recruiting, I should say, are UCF, Iowa, and the Missouri Tigers.
Should I be excited that Mizzou's a part of that?
You should. Dual threat quarterback. He was supposed to have been the guy to step in against Ohio State, and Aller had that Herculean comeback from the knee injury in time to play that game.
He's going to Iowa, man. Like Mizzou and Iowa in the same conversation?
It's probably just because they're in the same bowl game.
Sure. I asked you about him, Bradford, and I'm curious, Mizzou fans, and text us 314-399-9646, because he's a sophomore, right?
Yeah.
How would you feel about a quarterback that has yet to be a starter as the guy that takes over for Brady Cook?
It definitely would fly in the face of what you think Drinkwitz would want here, because to me, Tanner, I'm looking at the situation. It seems custom made for a bridge quarterback, a veteran guy who has been able to accrue a lot of stats against higher level competition, because you would seem to think that it would be Zollers as a sophomore, or a redshirt freshman, we should say, getting the reins in 2026.
Yeah, I would think that they would go with kind of a stopgap guy, but maybe you go with someone that would have 2 years left. Maybe you give him 1 year and then have him compete with Zollers, because they do like Zollers. He would be interesting to bring in. I don't know what the reaction would be across St. Louis or across the Missouri Tiger fan base, because you're right.
He's had good numbers, though, when he's filled in for Penn State.
He's been solid when he's filled in, but he hasn't played a lot. I mean, he's only thrown 56 pass attempts over the last 2 seasons. Now, he's completed 66% of them, thrown 9 touchdowns, but it would be an interesting guy that would be brought in by Eli Drinkwitz, of someone that hasn't been as proven as some of the guys like Miller Moss has been, or the Cal starting quarterback that's in the transfer portal. It would be interesting to see if this is where Drinkwitz ends up going.
It's it's a pretty darn good quarterback name who's coming away from Penn State that could be available, that wants to start. How many times have we seen that before, where guys who haven't really gotten the reps goes to the portal, goes elsewhere, and becomes a Heisman candidate for their new team? All right, let's get to some of these on the Air Comfort Service text line. From Andrew, do you guys think the Blues would be a better team or more likely to make the playoffs with Trent Frederick in the top 9 over Brandon Saad? Here's my only question with that. Is Trent Frederick in your top 9? Like, now, absolutely. But let's go down the hypothetical path that Dalibor Dvorsky gets brought up. At post-trade deadline, they bring up Dalibor Dvorsky because he's dominating the AHL and he's ready to go. Top 9 player, I would imagine, right?
Yeah.
So that replaces a Brandon Saad who was in your top 9. Where else are you getting top 9 opportunities?
I think the only spot then would be bumping Torpo
down to the 4th line.
Down to the 4th line, or unless you wanted to make him a healthy scratch. But you just rebuild the WTF line in that case. Walker, Torpo, Foxa.
Which Torpo probably shouldn't be in your top 6. He looked good with Braden Shen, but more times than it's kind of like Ryan Suter in your top pair. It's good for temporary, but I don't know how long you want to keep that going.
Just but a number, my friend.
So I've been told. Stay away from cereal, kids. That's what Ryan Suter told us.
True. I think he would make you better, but I don't know if it's like significantly better.
It's not vast.
Yeah, like it's not like you brought in like a 40-goal scorer or something.
And I don't want this to talk down about Frederick. I would love Trent Frederick on this team. The dude brings a presence to him, which I frankly think this Blues team needs. And he was a center for Jim Montgomery, and Jim Montgomery likes him. Could he be a third-line center for you? Absolutely. And you know what? Best case scenario, I would love a Frederick and a Braden Shen third line. That'd be a dangerous-looking line. But the commodity you would have to trade to probably get Trent Frederick, because a lot of playoff teams would be viewing it that way. I just don't know how that one would turn out for the Blues. From the 314, do you think the next big free agent splash for this Blues team will be on defense or at the forward conversation?
I would think forward, because I'm thinking defensively you're going to have Parayko, who's under contract, Broberg, I'm assuming they'll extend. And then you just kind of let it kind of fade out with Justin Falk and Letty. Well, now that I'm kind of running through this, maybe it would be defense. The reason I would say forward is because I still think they need that go-to, this guy we can plug in our lineup and we can write down in pen we're going to get 40 goals from. He's got a shot that plays. He's a finisher.
Yep.
That's why I immediately went forward. I could see, though, where it would end up being defensively, but I think they're probably 2 to 3 years away from having to potentially make that move.
Yeah.
I think there's a chance they may even explore that forward move, whether it be this offseason or the next offseason. So I'll say forward.
If I could be honest, I don't think they make a splash in free agency anytime soon. Why? Like, defensively, you've got Parayko, Fowler, Broberg, Falk. And Falk's there for 2 years. Fowler's there for 1 more year. And then from there, you've got Lindstein, you've got Juracek, you've got a couple of other guys that were just drafted second overall that Doug Armstrong said on Saturday when they acquired Fowler.
Fisher, and I don't remember the other
Fisher and
name.
that Colin Ralph.
Ralph,
yeah. So, like, those two guys.
I've seen him in person.
Big boy, like Colton Parayko big.
Yeah.
Playing for St. Cloud State, actually. He's having a pretty good year. Those guys, Armstrong said 26-27. So you're not going to go out there and make a splash for defense. By then, you've got the defense in your pipeline. And then at forward, again, where are you signing a guy to this team? Like, unless you're moving somebody out, you're not making a big splash, because, like, big splash is $9+ million for a player. And I don't know who you're signing to come in to play your second or third line when you got all of these other guys in your system.
Yeah, the only reason I say that is whether you sign a forward that is a finisher or you wanted to trade one, I would be open-minded to that as well, where you move some of those wingers that you're talking about. Because if you don't, then you do have a kind of a glut there of whatever it is, 6 or 7, 8 guys that would fit into your top 9 in that wing spot. But maybe you sign that guy, then maybe you use some of those forwards that we're talking about, and you go out and maybe find another defenseman or whatever piece it might be that you think you're missing as a team. Maybe rather than hitting free agency, you end up using those pieces to trade for that finisher. But I still think that they're going to need someone on that top line that you can plug and play and say, okay, that guy is a 40-goal scorer, no questions asked. We know he's going to get there every single season.
I'm getting a lot of pushback on the Air Comfort Service text line about me forgetting that Toropchenko could play on the fourth line. I wasn't forgetting that. I'm going down the hypothetical sense of what this team looks like post-trade deadline, because that's what Doug Armstrong's doing. Doug Armstrong is looking at what this team is going to look like at the end of this season, the beginning of next season, when Dvorsky and Snuggerud are available to you, because Doug even mentioned that the expectation is he's going to be signing a contract at the end of his college year with Minnesota this year. In that sense, Snuggerud is a top 9 forward. Dvorsky's a top 9 forward. Shen's a top 9 forward. Holloway, Bolduc, Neighbors, Thomas, Kyrou, Buchnevich. You've got your top 9 in place with a couple of other guys fighting for fourth line minutes. I just don't know where it turns into unless you're trading roster players for roster players in that sense. Tanner Hendrickson, Bradford Bruns. I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up at 15, we'll get to bet it or forget it. You send us a scenario. We'll tell you if we are going to bet it or forget it. But coming up next, the 5-on-5 play was brought up about this Blues team a couple of days ago, and Greg Wyshynski just had a piece about the offense still struggling for St. Louis. Are we seeing improvements, though, from this team at 5-on-5? I've got some numbers that I'm curious T-Bone and Bradford's thoughts we'll get to next on 101 ESPN.
Pavel Buchnevich is the jersey giveaway this week. And if you want to have a shot to score an autographed jersey, get entered to win that signed Buchnevich jersey now at 101ESPN.com or check it out on your 101 mobile app. The winner must be 21 and older. And my jersey giveaway is refreshed by Bud Light. Bud Light, easy to drink, easy to enjoy.
KXOS, WXOS, HD1 East St. Louis, 101 ESPN is driven by Brown and Crouppen Law Firm. We're right back to more of it. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
So a question that was brought up last week to me on one of our post-game shows was, are the Blues really improving at 5-on-5? Bernie Federko, I heard talk about it on TMA last week, and Greg Wyshynski brought it up in his piece on ESPN earlier today. And, of course, people hear Greg Wyshynski and are like, well, this can't be positive. It's not, by the way. Cause for concern surrounding the St. Louis Blues. The defense is improving. The offense remains the worry point. Sure, the Blues have received great performances from Kyrou, Holloway, and Thomas, who sat out some because of injury, still getting 23 points in 20 games. But overall, the Blues are 26th in 5-on-5 offense and 27th on the power play after 32 games. That's not going to cut it in the explosive West. That's Greg Wyshynski again on his piece over at ESPN. So, when that gets brought up, I do what BK typically does. I bring out an Excel sheet, I bust out my nerdy numbers, and I try and decipher where this team is at. And again, I think, yes, you have to look at this team in a 32-game sample size. But you have to also isolate it pre-Montgomery and post-Montgomery. Because pre-Montgomery was Drew Bannister, and it's a different head coach now. If you talk to anybody around the NHL, they glow about Jim Montgomery and who he is as a coach. But what I found really interesting was the offense, to Greg Wyshynski's point at 5-on-5, it has not changed at all from even where they were last year with Craig Berube to Drew Bannister to this year of Drew Bannister to Jim Montgomery. So before Jim Montgomery took over, the Blues were minus 16 in even strength goal differentials. They had scored 34 in 22 games, and they had allowed 54. That's averaging about 2.6 allowed per game at even strength, scoring 1.8 per game at even strength. But since Jim Montgomery has taken over, the Blues are a +6. They're a +4 at even strength. They've scored 16 goals and have allowed 12. The difference, because scoring is the exact same, 1.8 with Drew Bannister, 1.7 per game with Jim Montgomery. They're allowing basically one less goal per game at even strength since Jim Montgomery has taken over. And it's only 9 games, small sample size, I understand, but you go to Craig Berube, before he was fired last year, you were averaging 2.1 per game at even strength, allowing 2.5. When Drew Bannister took over last season, averaging 1.8 per game, allowing 1.8 per game. So since last year, this team has not changed offensively at even strength. Their defense has changed significantly at even strength, which is a very good thing when you're kind of in a placeholder spot until you get some of that dynamic talent that takes over. And how I deciphered this was, it was a conversation Curbs and I had on postgame a couple of weeks ago. And we were talking about where the Blues are at in similar to that 2011-2012 season. Like, yes, the Blues were a 109-point team when Ken Hitchcock took over, and they were one of the best teams in the Western Conference. But they were playing almost 60% of their games in one-goal games. They were 2-1, 3-2, low-scoring affairs. Your goaltending was dynamic. Your overall defense was dynamic. They bought into the system, and then the offense showed up the next season when Vladimir Tarasenko showed up and brought in that game-breaking ability. So, yeah, your even-strength goals have not changed. But I'm okay with that if your even strength defense is going to change. What you're at right now is you're probably about a 1 to 2 goals per game at even strength. Not great, but you're not expected to be a dynamic team in the NHL. Where you're lacking is your your power play opportunities. That's where you're lacking right now. And once again, you're in a holding pattern as an organization while you're waiting for some of your dynamic talent to take over.
Yeah, I think they need to find improvements at 5-on-5. And I don't think those are coming internally because, you mentioned, if you're not going to score at 5-on-5, it's harder, in my opinion, to win defensive style hockey games now than it was when Ken Hitchcock was running the Blues a decade plus ago, because back then scoring was down in the NHL, right? Like Vladdy had, I think it was like an 80-point season. Yeah. And it was like top 10 in the NHL. 80 points now is like
100 plus.
Yeah, 100 plus is now what that is today. So I think it's a lot harder to win more of defensive style games than it was a decade plus ago, like Ken Hitchcock was doing. So that's why I say, like, hey, if you're the Blues, Sure. I liked what Army did in bringing in Fowler, kind of playing to what this team's identity is of, hey, we're not going to win games at 5-on-5 from our offense. We're going to have to be good defensively. And with the Letty injury, it's time for us to kind of pounce on this opportunity with Fowler. But they needed to improve at 5-on-5. And I don't know if they've got the guys that are going to do that here. I don't think this is a coach problem. I don't necessarily think that Bannister was a solution or the problem in this case. Same with Jim Montgomery. I just don't think they've got the guys here to play at 5-on-5. And because they don't have the piece on the power play that you were talking about there, the power play is not going to uplift them. I think you can get away with 5-on-5 struggles if you've got an elite power play. But that's kind of a question of, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Would our 5-on-5 numbers be better if we had that dude that also helps the power play? Mm-hmm. I think that's the number one thing that they're going to have to figure out here to really exit out of this retool is how do we get better on 5-on-5? Because that is where they are really struggling right now. And I don't know if you can continue to build this idea of we need to be defensive-minded first, though you still need to be good defensively. I'm not trying to deny that. But we need to be this just shutdown team. We're going to make these old-fashioned 2-1 games. I don't think that's the case anymore in the NHL. I think they've got to find dudes that help this organization at 5-on-5. Otherwise, I think it's going to be tough sledding for them, and they'll be continuously where they are, which is kind of in the middle.
I agree with you. Internally, there are obvious constraints that are going to prevent you from really taking that next step, making that next leap, and going into the upper tier of the NHL in that category. Is there any part of you guys, though, I do wonder, and I understand that Booch has been back at the wing position for a period of time to somewhat allow that role to further solidify? Because when we're looking at the even strength numbers, especially from the first 20-ish games of the season, obviously, you did not have him operating in his most natural position to kind of let that coalesce a little more. And I'm not saying that one player fundamentally is going to change everything. You're going to see a huge sea change in that regard. But are you not a little more content or at least willing to see what his production at that particular position, his primary one, is going to be able to do to maybe uplift the team in that regard? Is there anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, there is. You went this entire season basically with Booch as a centerman, and this is a guy that I have said multiple times is a 35-goal scorer. You can't be a 35-goal scorer when you're playing a position that you're not comfortable with and not even generating scoring opportunities. So, yeah, I think there's a little bit. That's why it's a small sample size with Jim Montgomery. I think you need to get to about a 30-game sample size with him before you can look at it and say, okay, but is your even strength really improving? Somebody brought up and said, where do they rank in terms of the NHL at 5-on-5? So, again, I'm going to isolate this with Jim Montgomery because the whole season is very difficult. It's two different areas, and it's a small sample size. But in 10 games since Jim Montgomery has taken over, the Blues ranked 20th in terms of 5-on-5 goals scored. So they're averaging about 2 per game. Here are the teams around them: the Dallas Stars, the Vancouver Canucks, the Minnesota Wild, the Winnipeg Jets, the Vegas Golden Knights, the Calgary Flames, the Nashville Predators. Predators are at 15, so they're at the bottom. So you're 20th. You know what the difference is? Listen to these power play numbers for those teams that sit right around you're at. Dallas has 7. Vancouver has 7. Chicago has 6. Winnipeg has 7. Vegas and Minnesota have 3. Washington's got 8. Calgary's got 7. Your power play's the difference. And I was looking at this as well to put this in a better perspective with numbers. That 2011-2012 season, you know where the Blues ranked in terms of even strength goals that season? That was when Ken Hitchcock took over 13 games in, got them to 109 points. They were ranked 25th in the National Hockey League. They scored 134, which is averaging 1.7 per game. And again, that team was 109 points. T-Bone's right. The league is different now. There's a lot more offense than its stingy defensive play. But the next season, that was the season that Vladimir Tarasenko came in. It was a half season, so hard to decipher the numbers, but you bumped up to about 2 even-strength goals per game. The next season, when Tarasenko was a 65-point producer, had 20 goals on the season, you were at 2.1 per game. The next season, when Tarasenko hit that 80-point number, you were 2.3 per game. I think you're waiting for a game breaker. And I don't know if that's from the outside or if that's Snuggerud and Dvorsky that bring the offense. But I don't look at this as a bad thing because of the numbers improving on the defensive side at even strength. If you were still giving up 4 or 3 even strength goals per game and only scoring 1, then there's a problem with your system. But you have significantly dropped in terms of the amount of goals you're allowing at even strength, which means you're keeping it close. You're allowing your goaltender to pick up points for you, and this is eerily similar to what they did when they started that consecutive winning streak when Ken Hitchcock took over. I don't know if it's the same trajectory. I don't know if this team makes the playoffs for 10 straight years after this one, but they're doing what they did when they were building it back then in terms of getting the structure in place and waiting for the game-breaking talent to step in.
Yeah, and maybe I'm off on this, but it's now what? Just a determination, because the question of, okay, is their 5-on-5 play get better? I mean, you had the numbers dating all the way back to Peruvi.
Yeah.
So the same core has been in place in that entire time frame.
And it's putting 1.8 out there.
So it's clear that this core is not the one that's going to take you to that next step in terms of the 5-on-5. So now it just comes down to, is that Snuggerud that's that guy? Or I don't know if Dvorsky falls into this category or not. I'll throw him in there.
I think he does.
Just because he could become a...
Generates offense.
Yeah, generates offense, could become a goal scorer as a centerman, potentially. But as you said, generates offense. That's the only two guys now. And like, you'll have those answers potentially, or at least a snapshot of an idea by next year.
Yeah.
You know, so like right now it's pretty clear this core is not the one that's going to do it. You know, it's not the Cairo, it's not the Thomas, it's not the Booch. Even though, I mean, Bradford brought up a good point. Okay, well, was it because Booch was at center this year? He's been at wing under Monty, and it's still the same.
He's still
small sample
he's
size,
still
but
barely a point per game player pace in the NHL.
Yeah.
Like, even when he's healthy, been on the wing, he's still barely a point per game pace. The only guy that you have above point per game is Robert Thomas. Because Kairou's, I think, right now proposed to put up 69 in 82 games.
Yeah.
So, and to what you're saying, that is the pack mentality. Like that, people ask, like, well, why do you build a pack mentality? Why? Because you can't draft generational talent to just take it away.
Can we call it pack mentality when it's not scoring goals at 5-on-5? Because like when we mentioned pack mentality, like we always look back at the team that had the 9 20-goal scores in what was that
21-22?
Yeah,
21-22. Let me see where they ranked at even strength.
Because now that you say that, it makes me curious, because when I think pack mentality, I think of that team that had 9 20-goal scorers, right? And I think of, okay, well, they were good at 5-on-5. Why? Because they had 3 lines they could roll out there.
And I think that's what they're trying to generate as pack mentality, where you've got 3 lines that you can trust to just roll over one after the other.
And my point is not so much of, because like I feel like you trust the lines they've got right now. I mean, they're clearly missing a centerman and to me, a finisher.
Yeah.
Because it's part of this conversation, 5-on-5. But can you say you trust them as a pack mentality when they're not producing at 5-on-5? That's my question.
Yeah,
Is this
question.
really pack mentality, or is this just kind of, there's a pack and it's not putting up the goal production that you need?
And I think
what you have.
Yeah, and I think you ask that question now versus when you get those game breaks. Because I think that was the question that a lot of people were asking in 2011, 2012, right? Backus, Oshie, Perron. And you're like, is this the pack that's going to get it done? You changed defensively, but you were waiting for the guys to make it a well-rounded offense. And to your point, that 21-22 season, you were averaging 2.43 goals per game at even strength.
That's pack mentality.
That's pack mentality. But I would argue that that's what the Blues are looking at. When you get a Snuggerud, when you get a Dvorsky, Schen's playing on your third line. Dvorsky, you hope, best case scenario, is a second-line center. Snuggerud's a top-6 winger. And now you're talking about a Holloway, a Bolduc, a Neighbors, a Buchnevich, a Kyrou, a Snuggerud. That's 3 lines with 3 centermen that you trust that you roll out there. The question, though, that the Blues are hoping to get answers on soon is, are those 2 younger players ready to do that? Because Tarasenko stepped in and did it right away. Can Snuggerud do that? That's what you're going to have to wait to find out.
Yeah, Snuggerud or Dvorsky. One of those 2,
yeah,
right?
One of those 2, and the hope is 2.
Yeah, that would be ideal. And Snuggerud, you're probably not going to get that answer till next year, because our expectation is he's going to go on a deep run at the NCAA level.
And you're probably going to get 2 games.
Yeah, Dvorsky's the guy that there's a chance you see him post-trade deadline, and you get like a 2-month sample size. Now, I don't think you'll be able to determine a lot from that, because I think you're going to see it's going to take him some time. We're just now seeing it's finally all clicking for Jordan Kyrou, all levels of his game. I think that this is why I've always said I think the Blues are further away, and not so much of making the playoffs. I think they can still get to the playoffs in this window, but I still think they're like 2 to 3 years away from actually having this answer that we're talking about, if they're going to say, well, let's just see what we have internally first, and then we'll find out if this is actually a pack mentality group, or if we need to go out there and get that dog to help us out.
Yeah, you might have to, and that's what you find out once you get those. That's why you gain all those assets, and why Doug Armstrong has said, we're done with the asset gathering. Now it's about producing, and if you don't produce, you flip those assets for something that can produce right now. Tanner Hendrickson, Bradford Bruns, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up in 15, can the Cardinals surprise us like the Brewers surprised a lot in the NL Central last year? We'll discuss that, but coming up next, you send us a scenario. We'll tell you if we are going to bet it or forget it next on 101 ESPN.
It's time for another moment in Blues history.
On this this day back in 2015, a low-scoring affair between two Central Division rivals, the Blues and Nashville Predators. Blues would put 33 shots on goal against Nashville as they would win it 2-1. Roman Josi scoring first for Nashville to take a 1-0 lead, but then David Backes' 10th of the season in the third period, 2.5 minutes in, would tie the game up, and a Vladimir Tarasenko goal on the power play, his 20th of the season, capped off a 2-1 Blues final score. In between the pipes, Jake Allen stopping 27 of 28 Predator shots.
This date in Blues history was powered by Classic Air Care, making people comfortable since 1926. For all your HVAC needs, ClassicAirCare.com.
At Shane Company, we want you to be the holiday hero. We have so many ways to create unique, fine jewelry gifts. Give a ring or necklace with their favorite gemstone like amethyst or peachy morganite, one to match their eyes, or even pick out their favorite team colors. Customize our North Star charm with the gemstone of your choice for a reminder to follow their own path, or create
This is exactly where you want to be listening to us. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN. Vegas sets them up, and we're here to make the call. It's BK and Ferrario's Bet It or Forget It on 101 ESPN.
Presented by Circus Sports Illinois. Sports betting the way it should be.
314-399-9646 Air Comfort Service text line. Also over on our Graveyard Chat, YouTube chat, 101 ESPN STL. You send us a scenario. We will tell you if we are going to bet it or forget it. Guys, I will start in the NFL. Bet it or forget it. The Detroit Lions still will get to an NFC Championship game this year despite all of their injuries.
Oh, that's a good one. I will say bet it, but I don't feel confident in it. I still think they can get to the NFC Championship game with all the injuries. And I think they'll have to do it in the offensive shootout style that we've seen of late, where they had the shootout with, I think it was Green Bay 2 weeks ago. And then this week it was with the Buffalo Bills. But I don't think you can consistently win that way in the playoffs. That's why I'll say they get to the NFC Championship game. I don't think they'll win it, though.
Love the prompt here. However, I have to forget it, because if I'm really looking at the power rankings now, going down the list, heading into the postseason, with all due respect, I'm not even sure right now if I would put Detroit far and away above a Minnesota. That is Minnesota's defense. We know what that brings to the table. Now, granted, I would still go with a Goff over a Darnold in a clutch situation, but you can't discount a Philadelphia. And I am very bullish. I've already said it so far in this show on the Green Bay Packers. I truly think if they were to go head-to-head in that particular matchup, and a lot of this has to do with the fact that now David Montgomery is out, and you don't quite have the same component to that offense. Think about it, guys. For the most part, earlier this season, the way in which Detroit wanted to operate and was so consistently good, it wasn't necessarily because Jared Goff was setting the tone, even though he has Amon-Ra St. Brown. It was because Montgomery and Gibbs were able to do it together. You won at the point of attack, and now that element is gone. Green Bay can do it in so many different ways. I'm really trending down on Detroit now.
So let's just say hypothetically they get the second seed. They don't get the top seed. Like, you're taking on probably Rams, Commanders, something like that, I would imagine. I think they win that one. It's really going to come down to who that first-round opponent is. And then if you go up against a team that doesn't have a stingy defense, which, I mean, I'm looking at all of these wild card teams potentially, I don't know if any of these defenses scare me. So I think you can do the shootout. The question is just going to be, is David Montgomery going to impact this offense significantly enough? But, I mean, when Jared Goff's throwing for 500 yards and 5 touchdowns, I'm not going to doubt it yet. So I'm going to bet this one. T-Bone, what do you got?
Guys, bet it or forget it. Jordan Kyrou has become an untouchable piece in this Blues retool. He cannot be traded now. Bet it or forget it.
Oh, I'm going to forget this one. I don't know. There's only a few guys on this roster that I could put into a untouchable conversation. Like, Thomas is in that. I would put Parayko and Broberg in that. I would put Jordan Binnington in that. And then from there, I think I'm open to listening. Kyrou's on pace for 69 points, 70 points this season. I would take a point-per-game player over a guy who's on pace for 70 points if that trade was offered to me. So I'm going to say forget this one.
I'm going to forget it just because untouchable is such a strong word, right? You would listen, certainly, but he has really put himself in the rarefied air among Blues forwards, obviously, and his production in the month of December alone, in talking about it on yesterday's show, the fact that he has been so dominant, he has been aggressive, he has been absolutely in on the play on each and every occasion. He is looking more and more like that maestro, like that sniper you would envision a couple of seasons ago. So I'm begrudging when I say this, but just barely forget it.
I think I'm going to bet it right now.
Oh, you are all aboard. Hold on. You need the conductor hat?
Hey, give me that damn hat.
Are you aboard the Kyrou hype
Let's
train?
get on the Kyrou train, everyone.
Do it. I feel like I'm watching the Polar Express right now.
Yeah, come on, man. This guy's a 30-goal scorer. Hey, he's playing defense now.
Defense!
Yeah, we can chant that towards Kyrou. His all-around game's been better. I would say bet it. Now, my answer can change by the end of the year, but right now I think he's going to end up becoming a point-per-game player this year.
So let's say, hypothetically, Ottawa misses the playoffs. Brady Tkachuk says out. Oh, Ottawa calls and says Tkachuk for Kyrou.
Was Kyrou a point-per-game guy and still playing really good defense all season
long? Let's say he was on pace for 75 points, so just under a point per game.
You can have my first-round pick and whatever you want, but you cannot have my boy Jordan Kyrou.
Okay, now I'm out on this conductor train thing.
Book it. Let's stay in the National Hockey League, guys. We all know that tonight on 101 ESPN, 7 o'clock puck drop against the New Jersey Devils, currently sitting at second in the Metro race. But rather remarkably, the Washington Capitals, gentlemen, with the best record in the East, 44 points thus far. Bet it or forget it, though. Without Ovi at this point in time, the Washington Capitals at season's end finished with the top 4 seed out east.
Oh, I'm going to bet this one.
Okay.
Everything about the Capitals, it's not screaming they are Alex Ovechkin and then everything else. Like, they have consistently found ways to win hockey games without Alex Ovechkin.
Down the middle, they're great.
They're plus 36 right now in goal differential. That is the best in the Eastern Conference. Your goaltending has been phenomenal with Logan Thompson that they got from the Vegas Golden Knights. Defensively, Jacob Chychrun is a point-per-game player and a plus 15, which didn't somebody smart on this show talk about Jacob Chychrun as a top-pair defenseman? You're right, buddy. Good job by you. And like Bradford mentioned, like, they're deep down the middle. Pierre-Luc Dubois, who was a disaster in L.A., is almost a point-per-game player and a positive in terms of the plus-minus. They've got Dylan Strome, who's on pace for 100 points. Yeah, I'm not doubting the Washington Capitals. I think they were going... I believe they will be a top team in the Metro Division at the end of the season.
Yeah, I will bet it as well. I didn't expect them to continue to remain afloat when Ovi went down with, what was it, broken ankle or broken leg, something like that.
Yeah, it was the fibula. That's what it was.
That's right, fibula.
Mm-hmm.
I thought maybe you'd see them kind of regress back to the norm, but they haven't. I mean, they're 8-1-1 in their last 10. So, yeah, I will bet this. I think they will hang around.
Let me toss one at you guys because I brought this up yesterday during a commercial break. Capitals win the Stanley Cup this year. Ovechkin returns from injury, but he's 10 goals shy of breaking Wayne Gretzky's goal record. But he wins the Stanley Cup. Bet it or forget it. Ovi comes back for one more year to break Gretzky's record.
Oh, bet it. He's nabbing that record no matter what.
Yeah, I don't think you go out on top as a Stanley Cup winner. Who cares about that, right?
Hey, if it's me, yeah. Who cares about the Stanley Cup? I already got one. I'm going down with Gretzky's record.
It's cool that my name's on the cup twice. But
yeah, if you're already a Hall of Famer.
I'm going to take down the great one.
Yeah, I'm going to take down the great 8. All right, let's get to some of these on the air. Comfort Service text line 314-399-9646. Bet it or forget it, there will be an NFL team to score 60 points in a game this season.
Score 60 points in a game?
I'm surprised we haven't gotten there yet with some of these Bills matchups.
I will forget it. Scoring 60 is so hard. I don't even remember.
I was going to say, when was the last time a team scored 60 in an NFL game? Bradford, you look like an encyclopedia.
Not as we're sitting here on December the 17th, though, guys. Come on, if Buffalo, if even Los Angeles, I'll say it, hasn't done it by this point in time. No, getting to the 50s is ridiculous enough. And think about how Buffalo right now is on a run of 8 straight games. Only 4 teams in league history have done this. 8 straight games in which you have scored 30 or more points. That's just, air quotes, 30. 60? No, please. No.
Yeah, I'm
looking. Did you find it yet? Did Google tell you?
I think the last time we've seen someone score 60 plus, it's actually was it Miami? Last season we had 2 teams do it, it looks like. You had Miami put up 70, and you had... Somehow the Raiders put up 63 in that game when they got Staley fired in L.A. So
that sounds about right.
I'm going to forget this. Because we haven't seen that. That is the only time we've seen that happen. It's only happened one other time in the, what are we, in the 21st century.
Damn.
Yeah.
Bet it or forget it, Craig Berube will have a longer coaching stint with the Blues than when he's with the Maple Leafs. So he was 7 years with the Blues, 2018, 2019, and then last year. So what would that be? That'd be 6 seasons?
Yeah. I will forget this just because in Toronto, that team is so much more heavily scrutinized than the Blues. You know, Blues are kind of the second team in St. Louis behind the St. Louis Cardinals, which allows them to kind of, hey, if we're going through a rough year, we can ride it out with Berube. I thought they were going to let go of Berube the year prior to him getting let go.
That was when Doug Armstrong had the press conference.
We had that conversation on the show of, hey, are they at that point where it's just Berube can't get this team back? I thought for sure they would fire him. They didn't. Army pointed at the players and then did it a year later. I don't think you get that much leeway in Toronto. He'll get probably 2 to 3 years of, okay, it's Craig Berube's team, it's Craig Berube's vision. But, man, after that, if things start to go south, they will move on from him quickly because they are the big focal point in the Toronto media.
The market is just strikingly different. Babcock didn't quite get to that point. He was around for a number of years. I don't believe he made it to 7, so you'd have to go all the way back to Pat Quinn, if I'm not mistaken.
See, I knew you were an encyclopedia.
Yeah.
Bradford, ladies and gentlemen. Bradford Bruns, Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario. Appreciate all the texts. Coming up at 15, we'll get to the junk drawer. I believe Bradford's got a story for us today. But coming up next, let's get into the Cardinals, because T-Bone asked the question if this Cardinals team could surprise us, much like the Milwaukee Brewers did last year in the NL Central. We'll get to that next here on 101 ESPN.
Each week, the Rizzuto Show and the Fast Lane are battling it out in the Pick'em Challenge. But sometimes we come together just to hang out and watch some football in person. You can join Moon from the Riz Show and me, Andrew Marsh from the Fast Lane, this Thursday from 6:30 to 8:30 at Cyberg's in St. Peters. Come watch the Thursday night football game and get signed up for some Point and 101 ESPN giveaways and enjoy a cold Bud Light. That's this Thursday, 6:30 to 8:30 with Moon and me, Andrew Marsh, at the Cyberg's in St. Peters. Brought to you by Bud Light, official beer sponsor of the NFL. Easy to Sunday, easy to enjoy.
can now watch 101 ESPN live on our Air Alliance Team Studio Cams. Catch every show live on our YouTube channel or at 101ESPN.com. 101 ESPN Studio Cams.
Presented by the Air Alliance Team Heating and Cooling. Getting the job done quickly, correctly, 100% of the time.
101 ESPN Sports Center.
Devils look to even the score against No Time Bradford Bruns with this Sports Center update powered by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Roughly 6.5 hours from now, Jim Montgomery's Blues host surging New Jersey right here on 101 ESPN. St. Louis visited Prudential Center November 27th, prevailing 3-0. Since then, Sheldon Keefe's team has secured 5 wins in 8 games. Sunday, of course, yielded that 3-2 victory for STL over New York. NFL, Minnesota blows out Chicago 30-12. Atlanta escapes Las Vegas behind Bijan Robinson's 125 rushing yards. Portal madness continues as Mizzou snags West Virginia linebacker Josiah Trotter. The SportsCenter update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
They are St. Louis. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
So with the Cardinals wrapping up their winter meetings, now headed into the, I'd say dead period, but this is also the period that you start to see some signings happening and trades happen, probably once you get past the new year. You get to the conversation of what this roster is going to look like for the Cardinals. Potentially no Nolan Arenado, more playing time for some of the younger players. And I've been on the camp of saying, like, look, this is going to be a bad year. Probably going to be an 80 or less win team because you are doing this reset. But that's not the case for at least some around Major League Baseball. This was in Derek Gould's chat yesterday on the Post-Dispatch with Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns. Quote, Mo offered up the comment about how they weren't going to blow things up and that they had a better roster than people may think. That echoes what I was told by officials with other teams and at least one agent. One of the industry officials likened the 24-25 Cardinals to the 23-24 Milwaukee Brewers and how that turned out. How did that turn out? Let's refresh your memory. 93-69. A plus 136 run differential. They had scored 777 runs, which ranked fifth best in the National League, and allowing 641 runs. I don't buy into that. I know BK, if he was here, would be celebrating that somebody else agreed with him. Tanner, where do you fall on that?
I would be surprised if it happened, but when I started to sit down and kind of think about this, okay, how would the Cardinals get there? It really comes down to what we talked about last week of how do they get to a top 10 offense, right? It comes down to some of the young guys have to take that next step forward. Look, they had William Contreras, who was finished 5th in the MVP voting. If you get a healthy Wilson Contreras, I wouldn't be shocked if he could put up what his brother did last year, 281, 365, 466, 29% above league
23
average.
home runs, 92 RBIs. Yeah. A healthy Wilson Contreras can put that up.
Yeah, I think he can put up those kind of numbers. And then it just comes down to, okay, who's going to become your Willie Adames, right? Who's going to be the guy that is there as the 1-2 punch with William Contreras? And that goes to that conversation we had last week of, okay, does Jordan Walker finally hit his stride? Does Gorman? I don't know if Gorman's capable of becoming that guy. I think Gorman's more of that perfect third complementary piece that can hit 40 home runs from the left side. But maybe he is the guy that hits his stride this year. Who's going to become that 1-2 punch with William Contreras? But I think the spot where I think it would be more of a surprise, if you want to call it that, would be on the pitching side, right? Because we know there's the potential for Walker to get to his ceiling this year. We know there's the potential for Gorman to get there. We know there's the potential of Nootbaar getting there. The real surprise of where the Milwaukee Brewers were was like, how are they doing this, was on the pitching side. Now, hopefully you don't deal with as many injuries as the Brewers had, and you have to go through like 16 different guys to start games for you. But I don't think anybody expected Colin Ray to be a guy that would go out there, throw 167 innings, be a decent starter for them, and have a 4.2 ERA. I don't think that anybody expected Tobias Myers to have a 3 ERA. You got Frankie Montas, who, of course, they acquired at the deadline. They had Freddie Peralta. I think you can get better numbers out of Sonny Gray than what Peralta was.
I agree.
But do you end up having Palante and Michael McGreevy? We saw really good things from those two guys, especially Palante in the home stretch of the season. if Palante ends up being what he was in the second half of the season, McGreevy ends up being the guy that you saw in his final 2-3 starts of the year. Okay, now we're talking about a rotation here, kind of, where you've got that number one in Sonny Gray. You've got Eric Fetty, who will be a solid, I'd call him a 3. But you also got Palante and McGreevy are there that can help out. And maybe you get a bounce-back season for Michaelis. I wouldn't count on that, but maybe you do. And then you still have a lot of your bullpen pieces that are still here. I can see where your pitching ends up being better than what it was last year. It comes down to then, okay, does our pitching surprise us? And do our offensive pieces take that step forward? Excuse me, getting emotional.
It's okay, buddy.
While you
It'll
saw
happen.
the Brewers end up having that, right, with Jackson Torino. Torino was in the spot where the Cardinals are saying they're going to be this year with, say, Jordan Walker.
Yeah.
If he struggles early on, we're not going to send him down. He's going to play through this. What happens? He takes off. Do we see that from Jordan Walker this season? Your pitching surprises you? Boom. Now you potentially look like what the Brewers were a year ago.
It's interesting that because I actually am more confident that the pitching can do what Milwaukee's pitching did last year because, I look at Gray, if they keep Fetty and Palante, I think those three could do what Freddie Peralta, Colin Ray, and Tobias Myers did last year. I think 1 through 3, those guys could do that for you. And then Michaelis is a 5, and then you just hope you get one other guy that comes through, whether it is McGreevy, Graceffo, maybe Quinn Matthews has some type of surge towards the end. I think that is possible. The offense is where I'm skeptical. And we all agree, Contreras could do what William Contreras did. But they also had Willie Adames, who had 32 home runs and had a 118 OPS plus. Rhys Hoskins with 26 and 98 OPS plus. He kind of fell off towards the end. I don't know who's providing that pop for you. Jordan Walker needs to kind of be what Jackson Chirios was towards the end of that season. Because if that happens, well, there you go. But can Nolan Gorman do what Rhys Hoskins did last season? Can one of Alec Burleson or Lars Nootbaar or Mason Wynn, can they provide the consistency that some of those bats did? That's where I'm skeptical with this offense. I think you can have a middle-of-the-order bat with Wilson Contreras. It's everything else around it. And look, the officials aren't wrong with what they told Derek Gould. They are in the same spot because Milwaukee was like, well, look, we got to have Jackson Chourio come through. We got to have Bryce Terang come through for us. Rhys Hoskins, we need kind of like a comeback season for him. And then Willie Adames and William Contreras need to do what they continue to do. They're asking the same questions in their organization. I'm skeptical about the Cardinals because I've seen Milwaukee do it in the past with their position players.
I agree because from a pitching standpoint, you measure up pretty favorably with what we saw, especially down the stretch. Milwaukee was getting by, I will say it for the most part, going into September, and there was a drop-off with a lot of smoke and mirrors in the pitching department. But for the Cardinals, you're trying to project, okay, how many long balls are you going to get? Not only from the heart of the order, but up and down that lineup. And Milwaukee really had those in spades. You can look at a guy like Hoskins, for instance, and say, all right, he missed some time with injury. He was more of a one-trick pony as far as the power was concerned, but still, Milwaukee could bank on that consistently. Whereas with the Cardinals, even if you're talking about more of an average-heavy guy like an Alec Burleson, will we see more growth in year 2 as far as the lift, the power is concerned? Jordan Walker, quite honestly, despite the frame, despite the physical makeup, he has always been branded by a lot of different fans, people in the organization as what? More of a line drive kind of gap-to-gap guy. Where is the power, the increased potency there in the lineup as far as run production is concerned? That's where I'm worried about the most.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair question. When you look at that Brewers lineup, it was really 2 guys that you could look at going into the season and go, okay, I think I know what you're getting. I think I know what you're getting from Willie Adames. And I think you know what you're getting from William Contreras. Yeah. You'd come off of really only one full season with Milwaukee in 23. But, in 2022, he was an all-star with the Braves, right? As a third catcher / DH. It was always known that William Contreras could hit. It was a matter of, do you find him a position? And then, like I mentioned, Willie Adames. And then you thought you knew you had Rhys Hoskins. He ended up being more disappointing than I think they expected.
It was the first half he was great, and then the second half he tailed off significantly.
Yeah, but he still hit 26 home runs and was 2% below league average. You just don't have that second guy that you can say as you enter the season, this is what we're going to get. And I think the guy you could say is probably Donovan, but he's not a Willie Adames, right? He's the perfect kind of guy that's going to be 10, 15% above league average. I don't even think Milwaukee really has this guy on their roster, so I can't even give you a comp for who that would be for them. But you don't have that second guy, and that's why I think it's fair. Every question you guys have brought up is, okay, will the offense be the one that do it? Who's that guy?
The other piece too of all of this, and it kind of flies under the radar because he got injured, is do you have a Christian Yelich in the first half of the season? Because, Yelich was a 151 OPS plus in the first 73 games for them. And then when he got injured, it's like, well, who's going to be contributing there? I do think you need somebody like that in the lineup as well. Like, it's tough for me because it's hard to speculate of what these guys can do when I haven't seen the Cardinals really produce one of these guys to break through and be that stud. It's possible. It's very possible, especially now that they're bringing in more instructors, bringing in more voices to help out with some of these younger players. But there's just been so much, and I don't want to say failure, but there's just been so much inconsistency in the past of young player expected to be a key piece of the offense, and it was good for a short sample size and then fell off. I got to see it before I could look at it and say they could do that.
And one name we haven't even mentioned, I'm sure we will get into it more, perhaps even as the week progresses, Lars Nootbaar. Is this a fight or flight type of season coming up for him? How does he project as far as, is he more of a top of the order, close to the top of the order sort of guy on base percentage? That dovetailed a little last season as well. Or are you expecting more run production from him? Here's what I know. You have to be able, your best availability is exactly that. And you have to be able to count on that. You would hope going to post more than 117 times, because we hear about the upside. We still hear about all of that massive potential, but to not be there consistently, that's what you have to have from a Nootbaar too.
Yeah. Nootbaar's another guy. I didn't mention him in that sentence of, okay, Gorman, Walker, do they take their step? What is the health, if there is such a thing, what is the healthy year of a Lars Nootbaar look like?
I think you're asking that for a couple of different guys for that one. Tanner Hendrickson, Bradford Bruns, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up at 15, we'll get back into the Blues conversation because Armstrong has already shown some aggressiveness this offseason and midseason. How much further can he go in on this season? We'll get into that. Jeremy Rutherford at 1:15. Our pick'em reveal at 1:30. We've got the junk drawer next on 101 ESPN.
This is Jordan Bennington, and it's game day on your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN.
Blues Game Day is presented by Buffalo Wild Wings, the ultimate arena for wings and wins.
Blues in action tonight against the New Jersey Devils, which means you need to bust out the Circa Sports Illinois app and get ready for tonight's game. Why? You hear me talk about it all the time. The tight money line splits that Circa offers. Always striving to be the best and not be beat by any other sports book. So if you look at this one tonight, I love the Blues on the money line. They're plus 166 over at the Circa Sports Illinois app. If you go to any other sports book, sitting at plus 150. So you get better odds with the Blues in tonight's matchup. But maybe you're not wanting to just do a one-line play. Maybe you're wanting to get a little frisky with those Ferrario parlays that we like to do. Well, I love Blues money line, also under 5.5 goals. You put those two together, you're bringing in more money than any other sports book out there. And when you win, because I'm confident in myself, Circa Sports not limiting you based off of your winning. Everyone has the same limits, unlike other sports books. They're so confident, they tell you to go check them out because they know you'll be back to Circa Sports Illinois. So download the app today. Get all your hockey betting in, all the weekend football action, thanks to Circa Sports Illinois. If you or someone you know may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
for Blues hockey. And every month during the season, you can register to win tickets to an upcoming Blues game. Enter to score free Blues tickets now at 101ESPN.com or on the 101 app. Brought to you by Ted Cruz, serving original frozen custard since 1929. Giving you the picture, the real big St. Louis sports picture. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN. Let's open it up. The junk drawer with BK and Ferrario.
Along with Tanner Hendrickson, Bradford Bruns, I'm Alex Ferrario. We'll get into the Blues and Doug Armstrong coming up in our next segment. But first, Bradford's got a junk drawer.
Well, guys, in spite of the transfer portal, as we know, dominating everything college football related these days, bowl season is indeed upon us. You've got Memphis and West Virginia tonight after tomorrow's show. I know you guys are eagerly anticipating Western Kentucky and James Madison.
This definitely belongs in the junk drawer.
And then the brands. Don't forget about those. Coming up, we have the Bad Boy Mowers Pinstripe Bowl, Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl, Tanner the Cheez-Its Citrus Bowl. Yeah. Now I'm piquing your interest, right? No, I'm not. But
none of these sound good.
The cream of the crop, guys. Do not forget whatsoever about none other than the Pop-Tarts Bowl, because on December the 28th, either Iowa State or the University of Miami will claim the most glorious trophy, not only with a football, an oversized, gigantic football, but on the very top, there is going to be a working toaster. And, there's more. The winner of this game is going to get its very own edible selection. Any particular Pop-Tarts flavor that you want. It's going to be about 50 feet tall. It's going to slide through another trophy, and you claim that as well. So is there a better way to punctuate your collegiate career than by winning the Pop-Tarts Bowl and indulging that greatest confection?
I've got the answer to that question. Hopefully, you are going to be a guy that gets drafted and you don't have to play in that bowl game. But
come on now.
I do find it cool that the trophy has a working toaster in it. I saw that the other day. That's kind of cool.
Yeah,
brand new.
How long is it going to be a working toaster? Because like when you get it back to the university and you brag about it and then it stops working.
Yeah.
Like the coach is like, hey, I got a Pop-Tart trophy. You could go put some breakfast in.
I just now that you say that, I picture Mario Cristobal winning this game with Miami, and he like brings in recruits. You want a Pop-Tart?
You want a Pop-Tart?
Look at that Pop-Tart bowl we won. We didn't make the playoffs.
And he's sitting there doing this.
But he doesn't get to choose the flavor. Imagine having that on your profile, right? Your resume. MVP of the Pop-Tarts Bowl. I chose strawberry. I chose brown sugar. What's your favorite flavor?
Look, I'm going to say
I
something.
remember the last time I had a Pop-Tart.
I'm going to say something that's going to sound really hot takey here. I don't think Pop-Tarts are very good.
Oh, now that is.
I've never thought Pop-Tarts are very good.
I love a good chocolate chip
That's
Pop-Tart.
nasty.
Maybe you haven't popped them or put them through an oversized toaster.
No, I've popped them and they're gross. And then when you eat them cold, they're gross. Like Pop-Tarts. And out on
It
that.
used to be my like go-to. When I was in elementary school, every morning my breakfast was a Pop-Tart. And I would throw it in the toaster. I can't do them cold. I'm there with you there. That's disgusting. I can't even remember the last time I had a Pop-Tart. I don't even know if I would like it if I got one.
You know what
now.
I used to do? Because I just didn't eat breakfast from college up until today. I still don't eat breakfast. But for a little bit of time there, it was those cinnamon individual waffles. You know, those minis?
Yeah.
You put them in. Those are like the perfect thing you could eat for breakfast. You pop it, you put it in, you're out.
We used to have mini chocolate chip pancakes that we would get. Throw a couple of those in the microwave, put a little whipped cream on there. That was the perfect breakfast, not the Pop-Tart. I'm out on
I'm out on the Pop-Tart. It's always,
I'm fascinated to know what the Pop-Tart bowl, because there's been a lot of buzz around it. It goes to show you how pathetic bowls are now. But I wonder if...
T-Bone hates bowls.
Oh, I hate bowl season so much. Oh, we get to go play in an extra game that's for nothing. Yeah, good for you. I wonder if the Pop-Tart Bowl is going to have the social media buzz that it had last year. Because remember, last year it had its moment, and they're trying to expand on it. It's one of the better bowl matchups, honestly, between Miami and Iowa State. But I wonder if it's still going to have its moment, or if it was, okay, that was a one-hit wonder because it was cool because we had the Pop-Tart that they ended up cooking on stage. But I don't know. I could care less.
I'm eerily intrigued by this because I want to see if these two teams, if the scene thereafter can possibly top what you had last year. Kansas State prevailed in that one, and so you had a gigantic Pop-Tart running around before being lowered into that manufactured toaster, making these soft grunting noises and accosting people.
I want
great.
I want a guy dressed in a Pop-Tart costume running across the field with another former football player chasing him down.
To
tackle him. And whoever, if the Pop-Tart gets across the field first, everyone wins a Pop-Tart. But if the guy tackles the Pop-Tart, everyone gets a good laugh.
Let's do Pop-Tart races. I mean, Washington, of course, has the presidential race, right? Milwaukee, you have all the different
I want to see the Pop-Tart taken down, Bradford. I don't want to see Pop-Tarts run. I want to see one get taken down.
Let the Pop-Tarts live.
Let's play Pop-Tart chicken. Two guys in Pop-Tart costumes run at each other, and whoever avoids the other wins. Bradford Bruns, Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up at 15, Jeremy Rutherford of The Athletic. Coming up next, how far is Doug Armstrong willing to go all in this season? We'll get into that next here on 101 ESPN.
Hey, Blues fans, enter the Verizon Discover NHL Winter Classic Sweepstakes for your chance to see the St. Louis Blues take on the Chicago Blackhawks New Year's Eve in the Discover NHL Winter Classic at Wrigley Field in Chicago. One winner will receive 4 tickets to the game plus a $3,000 gift card. Hurry to select St. Louis area Verizon locations or go to 101ESPN.com and enter by December 18th. No purchase necessary to enter. Must be legal U.S. resident of Missouri or Illinois, age 18 years or older to enter. Void where prohibited. For official rules and full details, visit 101ESPN.com.
There's nothing more important than the look and feel of your home. So now's the time to make your home your retreat. Replace your tired old windows and doors with Marvin replacement products designed to improve comfort and efficiency. Fisher Window and Door Store, a reputable local company, will guide you through the entire replacement process. Their experts will help you make the right choice for your home, and they'll measure, design, and install your new windows and doors.
Hi, I'm Jim Fisher. Since 1941, the Fisher family has provided you with quality American-made building products, including Marvin Windows and Doors. Come visit one of our showrooms in Brentwood or East Alton, and let us help you increase the value of your home.
Bring that distinct sense of quality to every room with Marvin. Visit Fisher Window and Doors' huge, newly remodeled showroom in Brentwood, or Fisher Lumber in East Alton, Illinois. Quality and comfort starts at Fisher Window and Door. Online at fisherwindow.com.
WXOS HD1 East St. Louis. 101 ESPN is driven by Auto Centers Nissan, home of the lifetime warranty and 30-day return. Live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
Seen the Blues with some aggressive moves this season in terms of the offseason, of offer sheeting Broberg, and Dylan Holloway, and given up second, third, and fourth round draft picks. And then most recently, you see the Blues trade for a 33-year-old defenseman who's got 1 year left on his contract in Cam Fowler. So it's pretty obvious. What's BK always say, Tanner? Look at their actions, not their words. Listen to their actions, not their words. It's pretty evident this Blues team feels the necessity to make the playoffs this year. Who knows what happens, but the urge is to not be on the outside looking in. If anything, you miss by a couple of points, you're in the race all the way up until the final game of the regular season. But I guess the question now is, we've seen them be aggressive on the defensive side. We've seen them be aggressive in terms of bringing in players that match into their core. How much more aggressive should Doug Armstrong get? Because we saw the trade board that The Athletic put out earlier today. Brandon Saad's name was on there, but a lot of other players are on there, like Trent Frederick, like who's the defense? Pedersen from the Pittsburgh Penguins, who we've brought up in the past. There's guys that you look at and you say, hey, I wonder, Capo Caco with the New York Rangers. So I guess the question, T-Bone, is, does Doug Armstrong continue this aggressive mindset now that he's already kind of set the precedent of being a playoff team?
Yeah, that's what's so interesting, I think, for this stretch before we get to the trade deadline is, okay, will Army push more chips in? Because it's clear this team still has a pretty significant hole, right? They need a top 9 center. Whether you think that's a second-line center and you bump Shen down to that third-line role, or it's hey, Shen's been playing well in that top 6 right now. Let's keep him there, and let's go out and get a top 9 centerman that can go into our third line. And I wonder if we're going to see Armstrong look for maybe someone that can be brought in that also doesn't impact the future, right? That was the whole point of the Cam Fowler trade, right? It was, hey, we just brought in this defenseman. Sure, he's got 2 years on his contract, but we don't think that matches the timeline of a Theo Lindstein. We still think he's not going to be here for 2 years. 26, 27 is what Army said. Okay, so I can see why you would make this move then. If Letty's out, makes sense to bring in a defenseman to help you, especially because you clearly want to be a playoff team this year. How will he view another centerman on this roster? Is it too much to ask Dalibor Dvorsky to come in post-trade deadline and say, hey, go be that third-line center for us to help us get to the playoffs as we make this push? Or does he give up more assets to go find somebody? And the name that I'll just throw out there because I thought, okay, he's a 1-year rental is, help me with his first name again?
Mikkel
Granlund of the San Jose Sharks. He's a centerman. He's making $5 million on his contract, but he's only got this year left on his deal. Mm-hmm. Is that a kind of move that Doug Armstrong can go make? Like if we talked about Brandon Saad, right? Say you get a second-round pick for Brandon Saad in return. It would be the only second-round pick you have over the next 3 years. Would you then be, and I don't even know if they would take this, but maybe you throw in another piece into this deal and go out and give that and a second-round pick to the Sharks to bring in Granlund for a 1-year playoff run, potentially. Bring in a rental, doesn't impact the future of Dvorsky, gives you more seasoning for Dalibor Dvorsky to maybe spend the entire year in the AHL and continue to grow rather than saying, hey, come up here to the NHL team. We want to be a playoff team, and we think you're that guy.
Yeah. It's interesting because, when you listen to Armstrong's comments after the Cam Fowler trade, he said, he's like, look, I felt like I needed to give these guys a little support. And that tells you that he believes in this group and says, like, look, I'm going to go get this team help if they absolutely need it. They needed it on the defensive side. I don't know if they need it for just a placeholder on the offensive side, if that makes any sense. Like, for Granlund's purposes, I don't think he fits into the timeline of what this team's trying to accomplish. Now, yes, you are trying to get to the playoffs, and this would help you get to the playoffs. But if I'm Doug Armstrong, I go get this guy who can play a center position, probably third-line center for me, and I have to give up. I would imagine this is going to cost you multiple second- or third-round picks because I don't think it's going to be a first-round pick to get this guy. He's a point-per-game player. But it's not like this is a first-round draft pick type of player that you trade away. Those are Vladimir Tarasenko's and Ryan O'Reilly's rather than this. But there will be teams that look at that and say, like, yeah, we'll give up a second-round draft pick to go get this guy. I don't know if the Blues are in that situation now. The Trent Frederick one's different for me because he might actually play into the future plans of the Blues. Like, I could see them trade for that and re-sign it and say, third-line player for us. I don't know if you do that with Granlund. Granlund's great, probably going to want to go back to the market because he's 32, 33 years old, and he's going to want to probably go to a team that can win right now. And I feel like they've got a lot of Granlunds on their team already.
And this is where I don't know if we necessarily differ because I'm open-minded to the Trent Frederick possibility, but I think when you look at Grayland, and I've only used him as a placeholder because the reason I bring him up is because he's a pending free agent.
Yeah.
To me, you're not making this move as a guy that, he's going to be here for 3 years. I'm just doing this because it's, hey, if we think this is a playoff team.
It's a placeholder for Dvorsky.
Yeah, you mentioned Army's comment of, hey, I felt like this group needed support. Well, if we get to the trade deadline and the Blues are in the hunt or holding on to, say, the last wild card spot, and they are buyers at the deadline, well, what's the thing we're going to circle? It's going to be the center spot because they're probably not going to go out and give up what's necessary for a top-line goal scorers. And let's just be honest, those guys typically aren't available come the NHL trade deadline. But a Granlund-type player that's a centerman that's on a expiring contract, if you're Army, do you then say, okay, well, let's go get that guy? Doesn't hurt the timeline moving forward because we think that's Dvorsky's role. Not sure we want to put that pressure on Dvorsky to be that guy for a playoff run. Maybe they do. Maybe they think he can handle it, and that's the conversation the Blues will have to have. But that's why I don't care if it's, if we bring him in, well, what if they don't re-sign him? I don't care. He's just here as a placeholder.
Yeah.
He's here to help them reach their goal this season, which is clearly we want to be a playoff team. We want to get to the playoffs and give this team a chance and get some playoff experience. Well, if that's what they're going to be and be buyers at the deadline, center's going to be the spot that they're going to have that conversation about. Because I don't know if there's another thing that you look at that you'd say, Blues need to buy this for. Maybe it's a third pair defenseman. Maybe that's there. You can find those guys.
Yeah, those guys are available.
But the second or third line center will be the number one thing that if they are buyers come the trade deadline, I think they have to circle it and say, okay, do we put Dvorsky in this spot and have him learn on the job and put a little bit of pressure on him of, hey, you need to be the third-line center for us to make the playoffs? Or do we go out and find a stopgap solution, a guy that's a pending free agent in Granlund, for example, who's just a placeholder, and have him be that guy?
Yeah, well, and I think that question comes down to, are guys continuing to develop in the right direction? Because let's say you get to that deadline and Holloway's hit a little bit of a wall, Bolduc's hit a little bit of a wall, Schen's play is dipped off a little bit. Like, now you're really scuffling for offense. If that's where you get and Dvorsky has not continued his pace, I could see the Blues saying, okay, Dvorsky's not ready. These guys need a little bit of help on offense, so let's go get somebody. But even then, like, if you look at the guys that the Blues have acquired, whether it's the offseason or Cam Fowler, like, they've gotten guys who don't fill holes beyond this season. And that is a pending UFA, like you mentioned. I could see it, but I could also see the Blues looking at this and saying, like, rather than go get a Granlund who might be good for us, but let's be honest, Granlund's playing top minutes for San Jose because that team's bad. Where he comes to St. Louis, you're probably playing third-line minutes. Can you contribute to the same effect third-line minutes like you did top-line minutes? I really wonder if you are aggressive in that front. You go to a Trent Frederick. You go to, I was reading Peter Baugh, who covers the New York Rangers for The Athletic. Capo Caco, 23-year-old forward who has fallen out of grace in the Rangers. Does that player make more sense? He's an RFA. If it doesn't work out, you look at it and you say, nope, we'll try and move you again in the offseason. Or you've got the Trent Frederick side of it. It's just a complicated trade to do when you get a guy who's probably going to be desirable because of the points that he's putting up. And I really wonder if the Blues look for a guy that might need change of scenery to fill that hole for one season rather than go out there and get a guy who is probably in demand by a lot of teams that are trying to win a cup this year.
Yeah, so it's interesting. The question is, do you need someone for the future?
Yeah.
Right? Or do you just need the stopgap?
Yeah.
Because if you're looking for the future guy, you may need to give up more.
And that comes down to the development of Dvorsky. That comes down to how Dvorsky performs in the winter or in the World Juniors. It comes down to how Dvorsky plays in the AHL when he returns. Because I don't think you see Dvorsky until post-trade deadline. How does he perform up until then? Is he still a point-per-game player? Is he on pace for 60 points? Does this Blues team desperately need a center at that time? Because if both of those things are yes, then I think you don't even worry about it. We got the guy. We'll put him in a third-line center role, and we'll let him develop at the NHL level, figure it out. If there's a no on one of those, whether it's our centers have figured it out, Sundqvist has been good, Foxa gets a third-line center role, or no, Dvorsky's hit a little bit of a wall, then I think your answer is we got to go to the market and get somebody if you're in a position to compete for the playoff spot. Let's continue this conversation and ask Jeremy Rutherford that of The Athletic, our Blues insider. He joins us next on BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
Listen to 101 ESPN on demand. Get caught up with all our shows and podcasts at 101ESPN.com or on the 101 app, driven by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
This is the time of year when people start thinking about what the perfect gift would be for mom.
ESPN has your chance to win a pair of tickets to the 65th annual St. Louis Baseball Writers Dinner on Sunday evening, January 19th at the Missouri Athletic Club downtown, celebrating the top performers from last season and honoring the legacy of those who have made long-lasting contributions to the Cardinals organization. Tickets are on sale now for what will surely be a memorable night for St. Louis baseball fans. Get all the details and get entered to win that pair of tickets for the St. Louis Baseball Writers Dinner now, either at 101ESPN.com or on your 101 mobile app. Powered by the Schaefer Door Company.
This is exactly where you want to be listening to us. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
Along with Tanner Hendrickson, Bradford Bruns, I'm Alex Ferrario, as it is BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. We'll get to our football pick'em reveal on the other side. It was a great week for one of us. You'll find out who coming up in just a bit. But we now welcome to our celebrity line, which is presented by Collier and Thompson. Jerry Rutherford of The Athletic, Blues insider for us here on 101 ESPN, also co-host of the Last Minute Blues podcast. I've heard it's a pretty darn good hockey pod, T-Bone. I don't know if you've checked it out before, but there's three guys on there that just know what the heck they're talking about.
And on either group.
I've heard that those two are the best on that podcast. Jeremy Rutherford with us now. JR, how's it going, my man?
Oh, good. No, Donnie Fandango's back hurts from carrying us.
That's true. The legend can only carry us so far, JR.
The legend, yeah.
We're good, buddy. Let's start with this lineup tonight, because the first thing that I noticed was Brandon Saad playing on the fourth line. Part of me wondered if Radek Faksa was going to be a player in this one tonight that might signify another healthy scratch for Brandon Saad. Seems like that's not the case, but what did you make of Saad being on the fourth line today?
Yeah, I think, the situation with Brandon Saad really hasn't changed in terms of they need a lot more from him. And you make him a healthy scratch a couple nights ago, and then he gets back in the lineup. And, I don't know that he was all that noticeable. And, I don't know that you expect too much to change, even though it's a veteran who got scratched. I think at this point in his career, Brandon Saad is what he is, but he certainly needs to give the Blues some more if he wants to stay in the lineup. And as you touched on last segment, he was included in the Athletic big board, the trade board. In fact, number 2 on the candidates of players who could be dealt. So I think that's probably the move that the Blues are looking to make. Do they find a taker with Saad having another year past this year left on his contract? I've talked to some scouts in the press box here recently who really don't know, does he fit on a contender? Can he be a contributor on a third line for a contending team? They didn't seem to think that that was a strong use of Saad. So we'll see what happens as it plays out with the Blues, but he's on the fourth line as mentioned tonight.
JR, I'm curious your thoughts. What if the Blues are shopping a Brandon Saad, what do you think they might be looking for in return? Is it just kind of a swap of somebody else that may need a change of scenery? Do you think maybe they're looking to accumulate some more draft picks since they have traded away their second, third, and fourth round pick in this year's draft?
Yeah, that's the question that I had, too, for some of the scouts in the press box the other night, and I'll continue to ask around the league just to see if there's some sort of market for Brandon Saad. Look, I don't think the Blues are trying to find a player who's going to fit in their age group or a guy who's going to have some term or a guy who's going to be a big part of this thing. I think if you're looking to move Brandon Saad at this point, you're looking to alleviate that cap hit of 4.5 next year. We know that the Blues are above and beyond the cap this year because they're in the long-term injury reserve. So it would allow them to save some money and give the job to somebody else who is going to be a part of this thing. But, what could you get for him? Is there a change of scenery guy out there who could maybe come in and help you a little bit offensively? Or maybe if you do make the playoffs, kind of be a player in the playoffs, I suppose. But in terms of draft pick compensation, I don't think the pick would be that high either. So I don't think this is going to be a big return on Saad, whether you're looking at a player coming back or a draft pick.
Well, more on the trade conversation, JR, and then we'll get into kind of the Blues as a team now. But Trent Frederick's name, of course, is starting to heat up around the NHL. Elliot Friedman mentioned it on the 32 Thoughts podcast, and I think it was on the Saturday night headlines around the National Hockey League for Hockey Night in Canada. Is Trent Frederick somebody that makes sense for the Blues?
So I can see both sides of it, but I think he does make sense. And I realize that he hasn't had a good offensive year. But I think the Blues could use some toughness in their lineup. And I also think that you're talking about a guy who showed offense a couple years ago, the past couple years in Boston, and it was under Jim Montgomery. And obviously, I've talked to some people who said that they had a great relationship. Could he come to St. Louis and Jim Montgomery find that offense? I mean, I know that Jim was his coach earlier this year, and it wasn't there for Trent Frederick. But I think if he comes in, he's still in that age group. What is he, 26, 27? He can come in, give you some toughness, take one of those spots that, is it going to a Matthew Joseph? Is it going to a Texier right now? I think that he can be a third or fourth line player for you. And if he rediscovers that offense, maybe he can be a bigger piece moving forward in terms of a third liner who's in the lineup every night. So I like the move. The only thing is you don't want to give up too much for a Trent Frederick, even if you're trying to acquire him at the deadline, because he's going to be a free agent next year. So I don't know that that's the type of move that you want to give up a key asset to bring him in. Certainly not a first rounder.
Well, JR, that's what I was going to ask you. How much do you think Army is willing to go in or push his chips in for this season? I mean, he just acquired Cam Fowler, gave up a second-round pick in that deal, and you mentioned maybe not wanting to give up a first-round pick. But if the Blues are in this thing at the trade deadline and they have a hole to fill, say at that third-line center spot or third-line winger, what do you think, how much is Army going to be willing to push his chips in and make a move to make this team a playoff team?
Yeah, I was listening to the last segment. It's a great conversation to have, and I think that people are going to be interested as we get closer to that trade deadline, depending on where the Blues are in the standings. What is Doug Armstrong willing to do? Here's the way I look at it, kind of a multifaceted answer here is, what's the cost? Like, if the cost isn't much, or let's say the cost is a Brandon Saad, or maybe Nick Leddy comes back and you've got some depth on defense, so somebody's interested in a Nick Leddy and you move him. I just look at it as Doug Armstrong wants to win. You don't swap out the coach. You don't bring in Cam Fowler. You don't do some of the moves that he's made if you did not want to make the playoffs this year and have a competitive team. So I believe that Doug Armstrong will do as much as he can to help this team be competitive and play a round or two, but at what cost? We're not going to see a situation where you look at that trade board and you see a guy who's got to have a contract expire and the Blues giving up a Theo Lindstein or one of these prospects in the system to get that guy to try to get them over the hump. That's not going to work. So Doug Armstrong, as recently as the Cam Fowler trade the other day, said, we are looking for guys who are A, in our age group, or B, have term. The Cam Fowler thing was kind of the exception to the rule where, they wanted to take some minutes off these defensemen and bring some depth back just in case Nick Leddy can't return. So, I can see where some fans have criticized the Cam Fowler move in terms of where they're at in the retool. I look at that deal differently. Anything moving forward, the question is going to be, what's the cost?
JR, I know this a little far out in advance, but we've talked about Dalibor Dvorsky. We've always said when we get asked the question if, we kind of expect maybe he would be potentially a post-trade deadline. If the Blues are in the playoff race and say they don't make the move that we're talking about here, where they go out and spend an asset looking to upgrade in their top nine, is it unfair to put Dvorsky in a spot as to be that guy that comes in as kind of the quote-unquote addition from the trade deadline and have him be kind of the third-line center?
I think we could see him. I'm not going to rule out that we're going to see Dalibor Dvorsky at the end of the year. You know, he's got the World Junior Championships coming up, and, you know, then we'll see where the Blues sit at the trade deadline. Does he come up before the deadline, after the deadline? Does he not come up at all? Well, you know, we'll see. I'm not going to rule it out. But I don't think that the Blues are going to have a conversation where they say to themselves, you know what, let's just count on Dalibor. Let's just call him up, put him in here, second line, third line center like you talked about, and we think that we have a real good chance to be a playoff team and win around with Dalibor Dvorsky. I don't think they're going to put that on him. You know, if they get into a situation where they can find an upgrade here or there that helps their top nine, and they also think that, wow, look at Dalibor, what he's doing in Springfield. We think that he's ready to come up here and contribute. I think that's how they could be looking at the situation, but I don't think they're going to, like, stay out of the market or not go make an upgrade if there's an upgrade to be had because they have him. I just don't think they're going to put that kind of pressure on him.
A couple more minutes with Jeremy Rutherford of The Athletic with us on our celebrity line, Collier and Thompson celebrity line. JR, on the ice side of things, you know, I've been asked a couple of times just about how the team's performing at 5-on-5 and if we've seen an improvement. The numbers are eerily similar to what they were when Drew Bannister was there, to what they were when Craig Berube was there. How do you view the 5-on-5 game for St. Louis as it stands today?
Yeah, not a huge uptick, but it is pretty much the same personnel, so I don't know how much you can expect that those 5-on-5 numbers to go up. The overall scoring has gone up, and that's not insignificant, guys. You know, under Drew Bannister this year, the 22 games, the Blues are averaging 2.36 goals per game, and since Jim Montgomery took over, it's 3.1. So that's quite a jump in terms of overall offense, per game. And so whether you're getting it 5-on-5 or whether you're getting it on the power play, right now you just want to get it, right? But at some point you're going to want to see that uptick with the 5-on-5, but it's going to have to come from some of those top guys who make the paychecks. And recently we've seen that from them. All these guys have long streaks. Look at Kyrou, 4-game goal streak. Thomas, career high, 7-game assist streak. Pavel Buchnevich, what's he up to, a 9-game point streak? So these guys are starting to produce. So I think if we eventually do see the numbers rise 5-on-5, Alex, you know, I think it's going to be incremental, and it's going to have to be from some of these top guys.
He's Jeremy Rutherford of The Athletic. You can find his work over on Twitter at JP Rutherford. Of course, always great content over on The Athletic as well. JR, appreciate it, my man, and we'll see you at the rink tonight.
That sounds good, guys. Thanks a lot.
Jeremy Rutherford with us, and I think he framed it better than I could, T-Bone, in terms of that trade conversation and where Doug Armstrong falls. I think it's really going to come down to what's the asking price. Because if it's another, like if you look at where this team is at in terms of their draft pick capital,
it's low.
It's low. I mean, they have nothing and they're not trading this first round draft pick away. Like, that's not happening. I can tell you that with certainty because, one, the player you'd get in return is not going to just be a first round draft pick. It's going to be more. And plus, I think there's still, like, what happens with this team? Maybe you do miss the playoffs. And if you miss the playoffs, are you talking 15th, 14th overall? Does that become a commodity at the draft? Who knows? But you don't have a draft pick after the first until the 5th round. And then the next season, you've got a second, or you've got a 3rd and a 4th round and 2 5th rounds. What they could acquire, sure. I'm sure Doug Armstrong would be fine giving up a 3rd or a 4th round draft pick next season. But I don't know how many teams are willing to give away pieces for a 3rd round draft pick next season, because at the deadline, typically teams want picks for this draft because that's what they've been scouting. Now, like before this roster freeze, that's when you see the Cam Fowler stuff of it's like, yeah, we'll take a pick 2 years from now because who cares? But the now, that's where guys that's what they want picks, and you have nothing to offer. So it's really going to come down to what's the cost of acquiring. Because if you could give up a piece that doesn't fit into your timeline, like a Perunovich, like somebody in your minor league system that's not into their core conversation, then I think he's going to do it no matter what. But I don't think teams want that right then.
Yeah, right now they don't have the draft capital to make some of those moves, like the 2nd-round pick, 3rd-round pick. That's why we talked about the Saad thing early in the show, right? And I thought JR brought it up. I don't know what you're getting in return for him. Sounds like a lot of teams may not value him very highly right now. Because that's the guy that I would circle and say, okay, maybe you can get back a 2nd-round pick here. You know, now you've got another asset to potentially use at this year's deadline if you wanted to. Otherwise, you got to go to what you're talking about, some of the pieces that kind of fallen out of favor in your organization. And it just depends on what teams are looking at. Do they really want a Scott Perunovich as the centerpiece of a trade at whatever you're trying to acquire. That will be interesting to see. That's why it almost feels like, I think that's what Army meant when he said, we think we can recoup some of those assets back, when he was asked about giving up a second-round pick. My assumption was he was talking about somebody being traded from the roster. My assumption at the time was Brandon Saad. Maybe it's somebody else, but that's what it feels like they need to do first, is get back another asset for this year in the draft before they can potentially go out and make any moves at the deadline. And I do like what JR said about Dvorsky, right? I asked him, I said, do you think the Blues would put him in that spot of kind of, we always hear the Mo quote of, well, we're getting this guy back from injury. That's just as good as a trade.
Great as a trade, I've heard.
I was wondering if the Blues would give us, well, we're calling up Dalibor Dvorsky. That's just as good as a trade. And I think JR said it well, and I hope that's kind of how they will operate. As I don't think they will put him in that spot. And if that's the case, if you're going to be buyers and want to be going for a playoff push, they're going to have to upgrade in their top 9. And that's where I think it comes down to, okay, what are they looking for and what can they give up to go get that?
To put this into perspective, the last year they had 2 second-round draft picks. And you say, well, how did they get 2 second-round draft picks? That was the trade that they traded Ryan O'Reilly and Nola Chari to Toronto for a first-round draft pick and a second-round draft pick. So Nola Chari and Ryan O'Reilly as a package brought in a first and second round. So if you isolate that, Nola Chari is probably the second-round pick that you got in that. If Brandon Saad is playing to that level, then sure, but Nola Chari had a narrative around him of being a very good defensive player, and right now Saad's narrative is offense, and you only have 4 goals, and that's in 2 games. Tanner Hendrickson, Bradford Bruns, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up next, we had our football pick'em over the weekend. We'll reveal who won and who was embarrassed next on 101 ESPN.
The Blues season is in full swing, and you can tune in this Friday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. to hear BK and Ferrario live from the E&B Granite Studio at the Centene Community Ice Center.
Brought to you by Bud Light for the fans on game day, and by E&B Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Welcome to Staples.
Help! My family's in for the holidays and I need gift ideas.
That's why we're here. Staples has amazing deals on everything you need. Photo gifts, laptops, and gaming systems. Even custom holiday cards and shipping solutions to send gifts to the family that can't make it.
Perfect! Have anything for Uncle Frank? I love him, but the guy is never quiet.
Noise-canceling headphones. For you.
You get it.
Unwrap huge holiday savings at Staples. And right now at Staples, save up to $350 on select computers. Ends 12/28, in-store only.
I'm at the movies, asking people if they'll switch seats with me for $574.
Here, take mine.
So what about $574 if you switch your home insurance to Allstate?
Too much work.
Not if you call them. They handle the switching.
Now, that's a plot twist.
Shh. Check Allstate first, and you could save hundreds on quality home insurance today. You're in good hands with Allstate.
Not available in every state. Based on the national average annual savings for new home insurance customers surveyed in 2023 who switched to Allstate and reported savings. Savings vary.
The Fast Lane Home, weekdays from 2 to 6 p.m. with Anthony Stalter, Jamie Rivers, and Carrie Davis on 101 ESPN. Two former pros and one average Joe. The Fast Lane is driven by Scrap Mart Metals Recycling. 101 ESPN Sports Center.
Blues face a devilish challenge ahead. I'm Bradford Bruns with your Sports Center update, driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. This evening at 7, 101 ESPN presents Puck Drop. St. Louis, New Jersey, Jim Montgomery's squad going for 2 straight wins versus Eastern Conference foes following Sunday's 3-2 verdict over New York. Sheldon Keefe's Devils currently occupy second place in those Metro standings. That NFC North picture, NFL-wise, becomes even tighter after Minnesota down Chicago 30-12. Kevin O'Connell's Vikings have now caught Detroit atop said division. Elsewhere, Atlanta defeats Las Vegas 15-9. This SportsCenter update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
They are St. Louis. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
Oh, it's the best time of the year. And I'm not talking about Christmas. It's our Pick'em Challenge on 101 ESPN with Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns. I'm Alex Ferrario. BK somewhere in Mexico City. He did make it there. We found out officially, even though it sounded like he rode on a metal chair the entire way on that cheap airplane that he talked about, but he did make it, so he's not going to be able to listen in to us talk about our Pick'em reveal. And so, of course, over the weekend, we had our Pick'ems. All 3 of us take different games. We go with the actual lines in this one, and then we talk about the results afterwards. You get a 3-point pick, a 2-point pick, and a 1-point pick, and at the end of the month, we dole out the loser with some punishments. And coming into this week, all of us we're sitting with 1 point. We had a terrible first week where every single one of us just got our 1-point play and lost the others. So let's see how this one goes this week. First pick, we'll start with my 1-point play, and it was the Chargers and Bucks. T-Bone likes to talk a little bit about east to west, west to east. Well, Tampa's got to travel to L.A., and I think the Chargers are still in this playoff fight. And I think Tampa is kind of at the point where things are going to start falling off. It's the due factor. They've won 3 in a row. I think on the road, Chargers defense going to keep Baker Mayfield and that offense quiet. So I like the Chargers. What's that, -3?
Yeah. Mayfield, shot, end zone, Evans! It's a touchdown to extend the lead.
I felt great about it, too, because Ladd McConkey was playing. And I'm like, oh, man, Justin Herbert was good to go. And what I did not anticipate was Tampa also still believing they're a playoff team. And they smacked my team around a little bit in that one.
Yeah, Bucks looked really good, man. Mayfield's been playing really well this season.
You get Mike Evans back, and what do you expect? Of course, that team's come back in this one. So I miss out on my 1-point play. Not good compared to what last week was. Let's see what I did with my 2-point play, which BK was also a part of. And I like the Texans in this one. The Dolphins, are trying to keep their hopes. And I like the Texans in this one. The Dolphins, are trying to keep their hopes alive. But the Texans are coming off of the bye / they know they have to perform better being a playoff team. And this one being at home for Houston, I think this offense shows up. So I like the Texans -2.5.
I'll go ahead and hop in here, T-Bone. I've got the Dolphins +3 points on the road at the Texans. I don't trust the Texans at all, man.
Stroud. There's a block by the wide receiver Woods. Caught by Collins. Touchdown, Houston.
I don't trust the Texans either. But now I don't trust the Miami Dolphins. Like, he threw, 3 picks in that game? And 2 of them were the second half. Like, Texans did everything they could to lose that football game. But so did Miami. And I was a little worried there at the second half when Miami was trying to drive down the field, but then they followed through for me and they took that victory.
Yeah, I had no feel for that game. That's why I avoided it, because I didn't trust either team, and I thought it was going to be like the perfect world where both of you lost out on that one.
So I was thinking that too, which is why I was like, oh shoot, because the 2.5 point. I figured the 2.5, even if it goes to a tie, you get into extra or to overtime, you kick the field goal and I cover. BK though on the other side had the 3 points, but regardless, that's a loss for BK. 2 points for me. Let's wrap it up with my 3-point play. 3-point play, boys. I am taking the Cincinnati Bengals -5. The Tennessee Titans, you know how many points they scored this season? The second fewest in the AFC. You know where the Bengals have been good this season? on the road. They're 1-5 at home. They're 4-3 on the road.
That's weird.
The Titans team can't drive the ball past the first down marker. They can't stop plays. I think the Bengals win this one by more than 5, but it's a -5 line.
This will go to the air on first down. Over the middle, and it's intercepted. Geno Stone on the run, looking for a block. Stone into the end zone. Bengal touchdown.
Offense did exactly what I thought. A little scary there for the first 2 drives, but then from there it settled down and the superior team showed up. So that is 5 points this week. Gives me 6 on the week. Nice week for Ferrario.
Yeah, it was a good week.
BK's already missed out on the 2-point play. Let's see what he had for the 1-point play.
The Carolina Panthers, -2.5 points going up against the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys defense is an absolute atrocity right now. They found a way to lose last week in just new and intriguing ways. I think the Panthers are playing some inspired football right now, guys.
Pump short. Scan the field. Got a man coming open in the back of the end zone. Jalen Brooks hangs on for the touchdown. Third of the day for Cooper Rush.
What do you think the inspiration in that one was for the Panthers?
I don't know. I didn't have a great feel for that game because it was 2 teams that I don't really know what to think of.
Yep.
You know what? Good for him for at least giving the Panthers some love.
Yeah, well, I was with you. Like, I thought about it, and then I'm like, man, both of these teams have nothing to play for, so I'm going to stay the hell away from that one. BK didn't. He took a loss on his 1 point, so if you're keeping track at home, that's 2 losses on his 1- and 2-point play. A little desperation mode for BK on his 3-point.
But I like the Commanders -8 at the New Orleans Saints. Saints don't even really know who their quarterback is. Derek Carr fractured his hand, and the last thing I saw out of a press conference was, yeah, it could be some quarterback I've never heard of, or it could be Spencer Rattler. And I was like, well, I'm going with the Commanders -8 against the Saints.
I am going with the Commanders at the Saints for all of the reasons that T-Bone just mentioned.
All right, here we go. Rattler for the win. He throws, it's incomplete. And the Commanders defeat the Saints 20-19.
Your mistake, T-Bone.
I thought me and him were going to get the backdoor cover because they moved the ball down the field to the Commanders on their last drive. 13 plays. I shouldn't say move the ball. It was like 28 yards that game. But
like a turtle.
They had a chance for a field goal. You know, they go for that 54-yard field goal. I'm like, all right, he makes this. Boom. They put the game away. They are going to cover. And then he missed the field goal. I was like, oh, of course it's over. Now I've definitely lost. And then the Saints nearly beat the Commanders just straight up outright. That was frustrating because the Commanders, they were clearly the better football team. They should have blown them out the door.
Yep. But that's what happens when you pick the same play as BK or BK picks the same pick as you. Regardless, that New Orleans Saints making a 3-point loss. So BK loses his 1, 2, and 3-point play. That's the big old goose egg for Brandon Kiley. T-Bone misses his 3-point play. What about his 1 point?
The Ravens -16 against the New York Giants.
Really? I do not
It's a
like
big
that.
spread. It's why it's my 1-point play. But I think the Ravens know that they've got to start playing some better football as we're getting down to the home stretch. That Giants team is awful. 0-7 at home. I don't think they're going to get enough stops. I think Baltimore's going to run them out of town.
2nd and 9, wide open is Hill. Hill at the 20, 10. He can walk it in. Touchdown, Baltimore.
I didn't really have to sweat that one.
For a slight second, it was like, uh-oh, and then all of a sudden the second half was like, okay, we'll stop playing with our food.
Bad. The Giants are the team that, I told Bradford this in the office before the show. Look, there are teams that give up on their coach, give up a ton of points, the coach gets fired, and then they play better football. Dable is still there, and they gave up on him 3 weeks ago. So, yeah, they're going to give up a bunch of points. I was never really worried about that one.
Yep, so T-Bone gets his 1-point play. The Ravens cover easily with that 16. And now to the 2-point play for Tanner.
My 2-point play, look, you guys were like, Tanner is out of college football games. He's got to go to the NFL. What will he do? Not so fast, my friends. We've got the triple option game. The best rivalry in college football.
Desperation.
Army versus Navy. Army's the better football team. They had a chance to be in the playoffs. Navy kind of fell apart in the home stretch. I love Army minus the 6.5 points against Navy.
Straight drop. Throw is wide open, complete to the guy Gary's been calling for. Hiding right down the sideline. This will be a touchdown.
Well,
should have stayed away from the college game, man.
Yeah, and I didn't know how. I thought Army would, play inspired football against Navy, and it was clear Army said, we've already won the American Conference. Our season's kind of over. And we don't even have a bowl opponent at the time. So
good news for you, though, T-Bone, is you got tons of college action this weekend. So you're back, baby.
I won't be touching it.
You're
Well,
back,
I
baby.
It is the playoff. You're right.
You probably should stay away from the NFL.
And see, now Army's running back visiting the zoo up top. All because of that.
Because of that one. Woof. I don't know if I wanted that one. So T-Bone does pick up a point, which is good for him because he's got 2 on the year. On the year. I keep saying year. On the week.
On the month.
On the month. I don't know where I'm at anymore. BK only gets 1 on the goose egg, so he has nothing. And I'm 5 points up on BK, 4 points up on T-Bone with my 6 total points. That's our pick'em. We'll have our next weekend pick'em on Friday because T-Bone's going to be out next week, so we'll get those locked up on Friday. Tanner Hendrickson, Bradford Bruns, I'm Alex Ferrario. Let's rewind it next on 101 ESPN.
The Blues play on ESPN.
Shoots, he scores!
Tonight, Blues and Devils. Pre-game at 6, puck drop at 7.
The wait is over!
The quest for the Stanley Cup happens here on your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends over at Classic Air Care who are urging people to check out their old HVAC system and check out the financing options and look into purchasing a new HVAC system. Why? Because with government regulations on some of these new HVAC systems, the fluids that they use are going to hike up the prices, 15 to 20% raise. And so if you're in the market for a new HVAC system, you want to get it done before the first of the year because January 1st, that's when those price hikes kick in for the HVAC system. So if you've got an older unit, it's time to call Classic Air Care. They've been making people comfortable since 1926. I had them come out and look at my older unit, and we went with a new one a few months ago. They've got financing available options for you. And they've got such incredible, knowledgeable technicians that come out and check out the unit, give you their honest opinion on what works, what doesn't work. You can get that whole HVAC system before the new year kicks in. So give them a call today, or you could schedule online. Just make sure you mention Alex Ferrario sent you, and check out Classic Air Care, classicaircare.com.
What's it going to take for you to realize the
some legends of TMA? Then nominate yourself to be this month's TMA Listener of the Month. And if you win, you'll get recognition and other stuff. Give us your name, a photo, and other pertinent information at TMASTL.com. The TMA Listener of the Month Club, quenched by Milagro Tequila. Welcome to a brighter side of tequila with Milagro. Find out more at TMASTL.com.
Giving you the picture, the real big St. Louis sports picture. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN. Let's run it back with a daily rewind on BK and Ferrario. Brought to you by Gloria Loom, your home sold guaranteed realty. Selling your home begins at GloriaHasTheBuyers.com.
Blues fans, make sure you enter the Verizon Discover NHL Winter Classic sweepstakes. Your chance to see the Blues take on the Blackhawks on New Year's Eve in the Discover NHL Winter Classic in Chicago. One winner is going to receive 4 tickets to the game, plus a $3,000 gift card. You can visit any St. Louis area Verizon locations. I should say visit select St. Louis area Verizon locations, or you can go to 101ESPN.com and enter by this Wednesday. So by tomorrow, you got to enter to be in this sweepstakes. No purchase necessary to enter. Must be a legal U.S. resident of Missouri or Illinois, age 18 years or older to enter. Get full details now at 101ESPN.com. As we rewind it, we'll go back to what we talked about in the open. T-Bone, JR commented on it as well. Brandon Saad playing the 4th line tonight. He's gone from a healthy scratch to playing the 3rd line the last game against the Rangers, and then tonight he's playing on the 4th line with Nathan Walker and Matthew Joseph. It seemingly has fallen out of grace for Brandon Saad, and now I guess the question is what happens next?
Yeah. You said it during a commercial break of, almost have to wonder if this is maybe one of his last chances. He's on the 4th line. Radek Faksa doesn't sound like he's going to be in the lineup tonight based on what Jim Montgomery had to say, saying he was close, which is a good sign. You almost have to think if Faksa comes back, whether it be their next game on Thursday, if you look at it and say, okay, Faksa slides into that center, Walker goes back to that left wing spot, Joseph remains in the lineup, and Saad comes out. So almost feels like this could be one of those where it is, hey, last chance to really prove yourself. Otherwise, it's press box might be where you're going to spend a lot of time here in the next couple of days. Also feels kind of like a win, not if, they're going to trade Brandon Saad.
Yeah, I mean, they really like Alexei Toropchenko. At least Montgomery spoke today about him playing in that top 6, playing with Shannon Kyrou, had an assist the other night. And if that's the case, you want to keep getting some reps for Matthew Joseph, who's been playing while Nathan Walker, of course, is staying in the lineup. It starts to get really thin in terms of the options of who's going to be in there. And to what T-Bone's referencing, Brandon Saad, Elliot Friedman brought him up on the 32 Thoughts podcast that he's hearing that Brandon Saad's on the trade block. The Athletic had him as the 2nd highest trade commodity, and then Jeremy Rutherford of The Athletic mentioned it as well. You can hear that conversation with JR or anything from the show today on our podcast page, 101ESPN.com, presented by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. We will be back with you tomorrow. Bradford will not. Appreciate him filling in. He'll be in with us later on in the week, I believe. I think we've got Graham Francis tomorrow. But for Tanner Hendricks and Bradford Bruns, I'm Alex Ferrario. We'll talk to you tomorrow at 11. Fastlane coming up next from 2 to 6 on 101 ESPN.
Pavel Buchnevich is the jersey giveaway this week. And if you want to have a shot to score an autographed jersey, get entered to win that signed Buchnevich jersey now at 101ESPN.com or check it out on your 101 mobile app. The winner must be 21 and older. And my jersey giveaway is refreshed by Bud Light. Bud Light, easy to drink, easy to enjoy.